Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I bring you greetings on behalf of our city manager of the City of Austin, City Manager Spencer Crunk, and our Honorable Mayor, Mayor Steve Adler, as well as Mayor Pro Temp Alter, and all of the city council members, as well as the heroic, brave women and men of the Austin Fire Department, by simply saying welcome to the 2022 Fire Code Symposium. I am the Austin Fire Chief George G. Baker, and I am pleased to be with you this morning. Now, the question is, why are we here today? We're hoping to accomplish several goals with you during this symposium. One is to reignite outreach with the design and construction community, and next we want to inform you of a few new processes for the fire code, including the review process, the system plan intake, and the inspection process for buildings. Most importantly, we want to hear and we need to hear from you. I challenge our stakeholders here today to challenge us to help us help you, help us help you. It is important that as partners, we are all on the same page with what's going on in the construction environment. In the end, we are all working towards the same goal: a safer building environment for the Austin community. Again, thank you for your attendance today, whether you're here in person or with us virtually. And we look forward to working for you. Now I'm gonna pause 1 second because I want to call it up as Colby make his way up, Colby Jastrong with the Austin Fire Foundation. He's gonna tell you really how we got here today, this point right here. And then after you hear Colby, you will hear from our Fire Marshal, Tom Volke.
Thank you, Colby. Good morning. First and foremost, as president of the Greater Austin Crime Commission, we thank each and every one of you for your service to this great community. I was born and raised here in Austin. I have had the honor for the last 2 years as being the 12th president of the Crime Commission, which our goal is to support Central Texas first responders. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So from all of us, on behalf of our 60 directors, we thank you. We thank you for your service, and we're always here to help. Last year, Chief and I got together with some others downtown in order to find a way to talk about this issue. The fire codes and the building permits, and everybody's seen this great city and what we've done from a development standpoint. Chief Fires and I were talking yesterday about the amount of structures that have come out of the ground in this city, and the process that it takes to get these structures permitted and getting fire permitted. So, Chief and I were talking on how we could help. What we don't want this to be from a community standpoint and development standpoint and a real estate standpoint is have folks look negatively upon the Austin Fire Department. Your jobs are highly regarded and ones that we're going to help from a staffing standpoint to get the city to help you get more individuals in those areas to get permitting a quicker turnaround time for the real estate community. But today is about getting there, finding solutions for that. Again, what Chief said, helping us help you. But again, on behalf of the Greater Austin Crime Commission, we thank you. We're happy to be here. And we're always here for you, so thank you. Any questions or comments or thoughts about the Crime Commission or anything that I can answer, I'm more than happy to do so. Okay, thank y'all very much. Enjoy the day. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chief Baker, and thank you to the Crime Commission. They also provided the breakfast for us today, so very thankful for that. Yeah, please don't let it go to waste. So the way the program is going to work today is we have a list of several items that we're going to go through. We're going to try to stay on the time schedule as best we can to make sure that we're available for the folks that are streaming online. And so as we work through the question and answer part, our speakers are probably going to repeat the questions so that the questions can be shared with those that are online. This is a new attempt for us to do this a different way. We used to have our public meetings. It's been probably about 2.5 years since we had our last public meeting at the PDC, or at the One Texas Center, I guess. This is the PDC. So at One Texas Center, we had those public meetings, and it was a good thing for us. We got some good feedback, but with the COVID and everything else going on over the last couple of years, we just haven't got back to that. So this is our first opportunity to try to get back and talk with our customers and try to make things run more smoothly on our side. So there's been a lot of big changes over the last few years. With the kickoff of COVID and the shutdown and all the things that went on, we switched to digital review. And so switching to digital review for us was a big deal, and we didn't really have everything we needed in place to switch to digital review. So we're still working on catching up on some of our processes. We're looking to improve processes. We're looking to move the way we do things and change the way we do things. We're looking to be more efficient, but just like everywhere else, we had staffing issues over the past couple of years, and we've encountered a lot of things that everybody else has encountered. And so for us, it's been a tough 2 years, but I feel like we've done a good job, and our staff's done an amazing job figuring out how to make digital review work, how to change all these processes, how to adapt to working, basically from without any face-to-face interaction with folks. So we're a lot better at doing things online. The streaming of this today is another example of something we probably would not have tried a few years ago. So there have been some efficiencies created. There's been some things that have been done that have made things better for us. So it's not all negative, but definitely a lot of changes. And so this is our first chance to kind of circle back with y'all and talk through what it is that the community needs from us, and that's really what we're here to do today. So we're excited to do that. So as we talk through some of those things, one of the other big things is moving away from One Texas Center, and so the location here, which is now opened back up finally, is what we envisioned as a city as the permit and developing center, right, where we'd have all 14 agencies that are involved in the development process located in the same building with access and ease of communication and better work among the groups. Again, so for the last 2 years, we opened this building in July, so we've been here 19 months now. We really have never been fully open or never fully implemented. So we're rolling toward that and hoping that by the end of April, things are running smoothly here, and that we have a system and things in place where we can start doing some more of the face-to-face meetings, start doing some of the other things that we've missed over the last several years. So we're really excited about that. We're excited about the direction our section's heading, and we need y'all's input. So some of the other things that happened over those past 2 years is we adopted the Wildland Urban Interface Code. We're the first major city in the U.S. outside of California to adopt that code. And again, there's pain with that code and pain with using the Amanda system and some of the other things that we do. Again, our staff is doing the best we can, and we're working through all those challenges. And again, we need y'all's help with open communication, dialogue, and working with us to help us improve the processes. And in addition to that, then last year, the city across the board adopted all the 2021 codes. And so, in the middle of all these things, there's all these changes without a lot of communication back and forth with the contractors. So we feel like this is a great opportunity for us to be able to reach out to the contractors, reach out to the community, and get feedback and be able to answer questions too. And so that's part of what we'll do today. So we run through a handful of things. We have emergency plans up first, and it'll just be a brief overview of what we're doing with our emergency plans section, which is something new and exceptional that we've started doing. After that, we'll talk about the fire protection program, the fire protection system programs with some of the administrative staff, and they'll be able to answer your questions. We'll talk about the intake processes and compliance engine and all those things, and we're glad to answer any questions about that. From there, we'll move into the WUI code, and we'll get a brief presentation on what the WUI code actually is. It's not as bad as what everybody thinks originally once we really get into the nuts and bolts of it and what it actually does. It's a big thing from our community, and you can see with, I don't know if any of you paid attention to the news the last few days, but we've been on red flag days the last few days, and there's like 30 fires burning in Texas right now. And so it's the WUI code and the Wildland Urban Interface and the interface fires in the city is still a big deal and a huge concern for us and for the community overall. So we're going to continue to work on that and work on the things that go along with that. We're also going to talk about high-rise phasing, and Lieutenant Knox is going to give us a good rundown on what high-rise phasing should look like. And I think we've all seen with the number of high-rises that are currently under construction downtown, anybody involved in the building of high-rises, it's moving along very rapidly. And I think probably in 1999, when I started with the fire department, we had just under 100 high-rises, and with the ones coming out of the ground, we're at 270 now. And that's not even counting all what we count to be around 800 of the mid-rises, which are the 5- and 6-story buildings that we're seeing all over town. I think we'll be over 1,000, just based on the fact with our engineering staff that we're talking about 2 or 3 new ones every week. So the town is filling in, and things are filling in, and there's lots of challenges with zoning and trying to make sure that we're keeping people safe. And so we're going to continue to work and do everything we can on our part to make sure that the community stays safe and that we're applying the codes appropriately, that we're doing everything we can. But we also need y'all's help, and we need to be able to work together, communicate openly, and figure out the best ways to do things. Because there's lots of ways to do things safely, and the fire code tells us that there's certain standards that we have to meet, but there's also some flexibility in our processes and some flexibility in how things are applied, that we can work with the contractors to get where we need to be and where y'all need to be. So with that, I said there are a few other things we'll do. At the end, we'll do a Q&A after our managing engineer, Ben Flick, does a quick overview of the 2021 code. We'll do a Q&A and be able to answer any questions. We will have a couple of 10-minute breaks mixed in during the day today, and so feel free if you see anybody with the fire department patch on. They may not be from prevention. We do have some other folks here, but please feel free to mingle with the staff, talk with the staff, ask questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. And if they can't answer the question, they can probably point to somebody in the room that might be able to. And so again, thank you all for participating, and thank you all for being here. Excited to get this going today and open up those lines of communication. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And our first presenter is Ashley Hamilton. She's going to come up and again, give us just a minute as we transition with things. Trying to do the digital online makes things move a little slower, so you all see a little delay. So with that, I will turn it over to Fire Specialist Ashley Hamilton, who oversees our emergency plans. Thank you.
Good morning. How do I turn this on? Just push the button? Uh-oh, I need a login perhaps?
First take up.
Don't let the computer sit too long.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Right, close your eyes so everybody knows Roger's login.
No pressure. No one's watching. It's a long password. There? Sure. Okay, let's go here. And go to slideshow from beginning. All right. Tap, tap. Am I on? We're good to go? Hi, good morning. My name is Ashley Hamilton. I am the emergency planning specialist for the Austin Fire Department. I've been a firefighter for 13 years. I've had 9 years in the Austin Fire Department, 6 years in special operations, and 2.5 years ago I was voluntold / I got the opportunity to work on this project that it's kind of been stumbling along for the past 10 years. It's going okay. Last year I actually won Firefighter of the Year, and what I do is basically I empower firefighters and the troops on the ground with data, and by doing so we're able to save lives and we're able to reduce property loss. In our world, seconds matter and minutes are multipliers. First responders have to make critical decisions in 300 seconds or less, where the consequence of failure is death or catastrophic loss. And that's what I work on. Talk louder? Thank you. What I do is I work on honing down those 300 seconds and telling them how to make those decisions faster. Where can you get that information and how can you make better decisions when those seconds matter. Our world is not like the movies. Oftentimes, we don't actually have access to information. There was a water leak in the Independence Tower 2 years ago. In just 45 minutes, we lost $5.5 million in damage because we didn't know where the shutoff valve was. It's not that we didn't try, we just didn't know that there was a secondary pump on the 35th floor. Like, if we would have known, we would have been able to save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in damage, but it wasn't there. There is the International Fire Code that Chief Folke just talked about that requires buildings to give us this information. However, it often falls back on the authority having jurisdiction to implement the standard, the program, and the process. I don't know if you know firefighters, and I can say this because I am one. We have an attention span of like 8 seconds. This is a really big lift. And so we haven't put this together yet. And so this is actually my job. I'm putting together the standard, the program, and the process. So during COVID, we took all this information that literally used to be in the back of the fire trucks. We had PDFs. At the very far corner, that's the PDF. That's how we used to know how to navigate inside of apartment complexes. That. And it's covered in coffee stains. We don't know the last time it's been updated. There's scribbles all over it. And so what we did was we took all these PDFs and I taught them how to drag and drop, like Google Maps, icons that visually represent different things to us, to know how to turn right or left inside of the buildings. And this is an example of one. You can see the green lines. That's where a fire truck can go. If a fire truck can make it, most other things can make it. The red numbers are the apartment numbers, and if you zoom in on this interactive digital map, it shows you where you have stairwells and room numbers, elevators, all the things that we need to know how to turn right or left to find grandma in 301 that's having the heart attack. On the right, the very far right, that is a picture of all the emergency plans. The gold outlines, that's the standard, and you zoom in on that, it means that there's an emergency plan. We always have the PDF. We never have gotten away from the PDF. It's important to have that. But all the other things are interactive, and there's metadata behind it that you can upload pictures and videos and other kinds of things that are important about your building, so we know how to solve the problem when those seconds matter. What's really cool is in 3 months, we were able to take 1,400 PDFs and we digitized them. I don't know if y'all know anything about the government. Nothing happens in 3 months. It was really an incredible experience to see all this data come online. And since then, we've been using it and getting better at our jobs. We've used it on fires, on water leaks, even people that are lost in the Greenbelt now. During the weather events last year, we were able to push a lot of information in during the snow apocalypse and give like all these 24-hour contacts, and we were able to track how many buildings were actually offline that needed fire suppression systems. We even used it on the active attack that happened last year, and the lieutenant on scene said that the emergency plans map created structure within chaos, and it literally kept dozens of people out of harm's way. So why doesn't this exist now? And I think it's because the money's not there. We can't prove it. A lot of the money in fire software goes after the action reporting. It's like after the event, you're publicizing the data, they're doing all this other kind of stuff, but no one's figured out how to really monetize the emergency plans and also the event. And that's what I do. I'm empowering the troops on the ground to make better decisions because that's where our line of work is. So how effective are they? Well, it's kind of like a cheat sheet. And when you have a cheat sheet on a test, you're kind of good at it. This data is firefighter data. It's what we think is worth. So I was able to take all of those pre-plans and I was able to compare it with losses that we had within our data set, not what the insurance paid out. But commercial building fires were 15 times more costly when they didn't have an emergency plan. When you had an apartment building fire, the average cost went from $650,000 down to $150,000, saving $500,000 or more per incident. And I've already talked about the independents losing $5.5 million, and that was actually the insurance payout in just 45 minutes. But sadly, the worst thing is over 37% of all the line of duty death reports from NIOS recommended an emergency plan in their report. They said if you would have had an emergency plan, you might have made better decisions and you might have gotten out of the fire. Before I was a firefighter in Austin, I was a firefighter in Asheville, North Carolina, and we had a captain of a rescue that was in a mid-rise and he couldn't find his way out and he died. Imagine the relief of all the first responders if we knew where every stairwell was. So right now we're in the high-rise phase. Like Chief Oakey said, we have 240 that actually have people inside of them right now. We have about 40 being built. Right now we only have about 30% that actually have emergency plans. I flew to New York City before COVID and I met with the chiefs up there and they taught me how to make this BIC on the side. It's a building information card. And they have 6,000, by the way. And that BIC, essentially like a cross-section of the building. Imagine like a cake, and you slice it in half, and you get to look at the side. On the side, you have the levels and the floors, and then you have the green are the stairwells, the blue are the elevators, where you have the X's. That means you can get inside that, but you can't get off on that level. So oftentimes in elevator blind shafts, you wouldn't be able to get to that person if they were stuck there. And so you have the green, and then you go down. So if you need to get to floor 19, you would be able to use S1, E5, E6, E7, but you would not be able to use elevator bank E1, 2, 3. So this is a cheat sheet for us to navigate inside the building. It also tells us where shutoff valves are. It shows us where all the other kind of things that we need to get to. Our real Achilles heel is the mid-rises. Mid-rises started about 10 years ago. It means that now what used to be new is no longer new, and we can kind of start to see it in the compliance engine. There's a lot of things that aren't passing anymore, and unfortunately they're like a city block, and we have 800 of them, and right now we only have 28% that have emergency plans. And like I said, that was when I was in Asheville, that was the building that that captain passed away in. So one of the 6 goals that Austin Fire Department has is preventing injuries, loss of life, and property. In LA, 2020, there was a big explosion because the firefighters didn't know that there are hazardous materials inside of the building. And had they probably wouldn't have made that decision. So I was able to pull all of this data, essentially all the Tier 2 data that we had. Travis County has 1,800, and just in Austin, we have 1,200. And by Tier 2, I mean the things that can go boom. And what's cool about this is I was able to provide the link. So not only do you get to visually see it before you go into the building, but you also click the link. Don't worry, everything always has passwords, and there are other things protected. There are layers upon layers of protection, which is good, right? This is important data that not everybody needs to have in case it's nefarious and all that stuff. So there's also some other rules in the TIC that basically says if the building owners give us this information, it can't be publicly requested because it falls under this branch that if you give it to us to use this or stuff, that it won't be released in that world. So what else is in the map? Well, we have a lot of information right now. We have 11,000 24-hour contacts that have been updated within the past year. There have like 4,000 roads plus that Google Maps doesn't know about. We have over 10,000 apartment numbers. We have unit numbers and room numbers. We only have 8,000 stairwells and pools, but you know, my goal is to get all the stairwells in there. And what's cool is over the last 2 years, we've had additional like 230 emergency plans that get put in. I tell the firefighters, this is like Waze. We're constantly just adding things, and we're trying to tell us like, hey, this is over here. Hey, this is over here. Just keep putting stuff in there and combing the data. And what's great is now we know the last time we touched it, and we can be on top of it. It's really cool. It's really cool to see it moving. So I've been working on this for like 5 years. I started because I was in a mid-rise and we couldn't find the shutoff valve. And I just got so mad. It was over like right off of airport. It's like the biggest one we have. It's like 420,000 square feet. And I just got mad and I asked for a computer, and my captain, Chief McEwen, gave me a computer, and I was like, I need something else. I need something else. I just got madder and madder and just started working on it. The first map I ever made took 60 hours to make. And I was like, that's not the right answer. That's not sustainable. So people saw what I was doing, and then I got offered this job in 2019. During 2020, during COVID, we pivoted and we digitized all those plans, which was a huge start. And right now we're in the high-rise phase. We have a lot more work to do in the high-rise phase. And then hopefully before the end of the year, we can start on the mid-rise phase because, like I said, that's our Achilles heel. And then we can move on to large events. This is my contact card. You're welcome to scan that and get in touch with me. Also, my email is ashleyhamilton@austintexas.gov. But yeah, that's what I do. I empower the troops on the ground to save lives and reduce property loss. Does anybody have any questions? I think that my talk was a little fast.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. And so one of the things that we want to share with the community related to that is that when we reach out for the emergency plan information to the building engineers or construction supers during the thing, it's important that we get that information. It allows us to build the plans and allows us to provide better service, not just for fires, but for water shut off and some of the other things that we're frequently called out for. So that's a big deal and something we're proud of. We still got a long way to go, but we're going to continue to work on it. So Ashley, thank you, and thank you to everybody else that's participated with building that to where it is at this point. One thing I want to remind folks that are online, you can submit questions in the chat online, and we will potentially be able to answer those questions. So if you're online and you want to submit questions in the chat, go ahead, and we have folks monitoring the chat for questions. So with that, I will introduce our next group. It's Krisha Allen and her team, and we're going to talk quickly about the administrative processes and how things work on plant intake and all the other things related to everything that Krisha's going to tell us about. And I think Natalie Rickerson is also going to help with that. And again, we'll take questions afterwards. So Krisha, come on up.
Okay. Okay, my name is Krisha Allen, and I serve as the Customer Service Supervisor for the Fire Marshal's Office. My team administratively support different sections within the Fire Marshal's Office to include the Fire Protection System Program, Hazmat Program, Plan Intake, and Inspection Scheduling. And today I'm going to go ahead and give you additional information on the Fire Protection System Program. I know some of the fire system contractors that are here today probably already have an account with the compliance engine, but definitely wanted to go ahead, if you're not familiar with the program, give some information about that. So in 2017, we began tracking compliance protection systems, and we partnered with a company called Brycer, and they use an online tool, the Compliance Engine. We track all the annual reports, the 6 months reports for kitchen hoods, deficiencies, repair reports, and those are all required to be submitted through the Compliance Engine. So currently, the Austin Fire Department is tracking about 75% of systems within the city, but obviously the goal is always to reach 100%. So overall, the program, we just want to make sure that all the systems within commercial properties are working properly and there aren't any deficiencies. And some additional information about requirements and some of the challenges that we faced within the program. For fire system contractors, if you are working here in Austin, you're installing systems, you're performing annual inspection reports or repairs, you are required to obtain a compliance account and register with that. And you can go ahead and reach out to Brycer, and they can go ahead and help you with the registration and training. You can either online sign up for that at Compliance Engine, or you can give them a call. The customer service is really great, so they'll definitely walk you through that. They have all tutorials and all types of one-on-one training that they can provide. I know sometimes with new programs, you're having to learn all the tools, but it is a very user-friendly database, so there shouldn't be too many issues when submitting inspections. And then the property owners are responsible for the fire system compliance as outlined in the current adopted fire code. So they do have to make sure that they're maintaining those annual inspections, that they are making sure if there are deficiencies, then they need to go ahead and get those repaired. One of the challenges that we've faced is with acceptance testing. So whenever there's a new high-rise that's going up or any type of buildings, obviously you're going to be installing new systems to include fire alarm systems, sprinkler systems, and the initial part of that is that acceptance testing. So within the database, we don't have those property information and we don't have those systems. So we do rely on the fire system contractors to submit that information through the compliance engine. They would go ahead and submit a premise request and then also let us know what systems are there. And so the submittal process for that is as soon as you've had that fire alarm inspection, you can go ahead and submit that, or the sprinkler inspection. So you can use the report that the Austin Fire Department submits. As long as it's satisfactory, you can use that one. You can also use acceptance testing as far as what you've documented from your company, and then you can also submit the TDI report that you submit to the state. So once that's submitted, then that will start the clock and that will get that information into the compliance engine, so then we can start performing, getting those annual reports. And then as far as the standpipes, we've also had a challenge as far as making sure that we're tracking the 5-year and the annual. So when you are submitting the acceptance testing, please make sure that you're uploading the report to the acceptance testing reports and the annual. And then after that, you can schedule your fire final. And, I know the general contractors are working together with the fire system contractors. So once the general contractors call in for their fire final, they won't have any issues. They'll be able to schedule that because everything has been submitted through the compliance engine. Another challenge are deficiency and repair reports. So definitely whenever there's a deficiency, just make sure we get that submitted as quickly as possible. We have a team of inspectors that review that information. So if there is a system impairment and we need to get involved, if there's a fire watch involved, we definitely need to know about that. And then the second part of that are the repair reports. So after you've submitted the deficiency, we definitely need to make sure we are getting those repair reports. So those also, you can submit those through your account. If you are the same contractor that performed the deficiency or submitted the deficiency report, then there is an easy tool where you can just click off those deficiency tracking and just submit that that's been corrected. And so a lot of times we do have property owners that contact us, and sometimes their properties are showing as compliant, as non-compliant, and they don't understand because they've had their annual inspection, they've submitted, they've had their repairs. So really what's happening is the repair reports haven't been submitted. So once we get that, the system will show as compliant. Our database pretty much is in real time, within a day or so, that property will now be showing as compliant, so they won't, they'll be able to have their property showing with no issues. And as far as contact information, you can contact at AFD Compliance or give us a call. We have administrative support that support the program, and that's Megan Betts and Chantel Woodland. What they do is they review all the reports, so any reports that the contractors are submitting, they are reviewing those, making sure that things are matching. If you're submitting a fire alarm, that the report matches fire alarm. Another thing is the premise request. So we do also rely on the fire contractors to make sure that they are submitting those premise requests for any type of new properties. And if for some reason, they aren't in our jurisdiction, we will go ahead and send those back, and we don't want to have those in our database. Also with rejections, if you submit a report and it has any type of errors, they will go ahead and send that back to you and have, it'll be very detailed as far as why they're rejecting the report, so you'll be able to resubmit. And then another really important thing is property data updates. So a lot of times, we want to make sure that all the information in the compliance engine is up to date. So we're always scrubbing the data. So, if you're out there and you're performing inspections and, there's a building that, in the compliance engine is only stating it has a fire alarm, but it does also have a kitchen hood or some other systems, you can definitely reach out to us and we can go ahead and update that information. And then we also have information on our website, and that goes into more detail. We have a contractor notification that goes step by step as far as how to register, what you need for your registration, and also we'll show you all the different systems that need to be submitted through the compliance engine. Property managers as well, it has additional information, and please just remember that subcontractors, the fire system contractors, are the only ones who would be creating accounts. So property managers or general contractors do not need to create an account, and but yeah, that'll have additional information for both contractors and property managers. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Natalie, and she'll go ahead and provide some additional information on plan intake.
Thank you, Krisha. Give it 1 minute here. Good morning, everybody. My name is Natalie Richardson. I'm a program coordinator for the Fire Marshal's office. I'm part of Krisha's team. I work with our intake program, a team of one, a team that does an outstanding job at receiving all the plans that the fire contractors submit to us, making sure they're accurate and processed. We also, I also work with our hazmat permitting team, our team of admins that support our hydrant flow testing program. But today we're going to focus on plan intake, basically plans that are submitted to Austin Fire Department. So a lot of you are already contractors that are used to submitting work to us, are familiar with our process, but hopefully you will get a few pieces of information that may help you. And also, if anyone is a new company that's trying to get set up, we'll explain a little bit about the process and what it entails. The Austin Fire Department has a team of engineers that reviews site building plans and fire protection system plans to ensure that they meet International Fire Code, building code, any local amendments, NFPA standards, etc. And the majority of those are site plans and building plans that are submitted through Development Services Department. Today our focus is on the ones that are submitted directly through the Fire Marshal's office, and those are the actual fire protection system plans. Some of the plans that are submitted directly to AFD obviously include fire alarm, fire sprinklers, electric locks or access control, and multiple miscellaneous type of plans such as clean agent, emergency responder communication enhancement systems, or ERCs, which is one that we're seeing a lot of activity on recently. And those plans are submitted to us through a system that is, or process that is electronic. Our engineers are doing an electronic review. It is important to emphasize that while our system is electronic, it is no fully automatic. It's not automated. So there's a lot of different components. We have to use different platforms on our end to do all the data entry. And it also involves multiple avenues that the contractors have to use. So our team is always available and willing to help you if you have any questions about how to complete the submission. But it does involve multiple systems. For example, if you are a contractor, let's say you're a new contractor, you're trying to get set up, you will get started by reaching out to our to our intake team by emailing firepreventionadmin@austintexas.gov. But who can do that? Who can actually submit plans to us? The Fire Marshal's office does not receive fire system plans from general contractors or third-party permitting companies. We receive them directly from the fire protection company that is going to be installing the system. And this is very important. Sometimes we have companies reach out to us, hey, I want to get set up, I want to start submitting plans, and we realize that they're the ones maybe designing, not installing. So it's key to know it has to be that company that will be responsible for the installation, that company that is going to be coordinating all the inspections, be on site through the whole process from plan review all the way until all inspections are approved and the process is finalized. So your sprinkler or alarm contractor, for example, is who will be submitting those plans. So to get started, send an email to our fire prevention admin at austintexas.gov address, which will be available in that presentation for you. When you send that email, our team is going to help you through the different areas and steps of the process. And one of the first things is we're going to make sure you're set up for payment. Many of you are familiar with Austin Bill Plus Connect, which is the platform that we use, not just Austin Fire Department, but Development Services Department, other departments use for permitting, etc. So we will make sure that the company has an account created and active. Now, it's important to know that while other departments have their whole process maybe through Austin Bill Plus Connect, and you're able to do submissions through that portal, that's not the case for Austin Fire Department. We, at this time, are using Austin Bill Plus Connect solely for the purpose of billing. So we'll give you the instructions to be set up so that when your bill is ready, we'll tell you and you can submit payment. That's the extent of it. You're not going to be able to upload plans through that platform. The next item that we'll do is give you access to our box.com account. We started the electronic plan review process and using Box when the pandemic started. Basically, we were sort of thrown and forced to do something, and the tool that we had available at the time, and as of now is the one that we're still using for contractors to upload their submittal plans, is box.com. So we'll give you access to our account. The company will have one email designated to have access, and we'll give you also instructions through a contractor's guide that tells you how to get set up, how to upload the plans. It includes even screenshots for you to see how to complete that process. When uploading plans, it's important for contractors to keep in mind that they're doing a complete packet, that your plans, data, equipment data, or calculations, everything that is required is uploaded there, so it doesn't delay your process. And our team will also give you links that can be used to find our plan submission checklist. The checklists are very important. Keep in mind, they're not just for you to go and check. They're really important because they're going to tell you what are all those documents you have to include. They'll tell you things like you have to list your building permits if applicable, etc. And doing a complete and proper, let's say, submittal packet is very crucial, because if you submit and our intake team is reviewing what you submitted and there's a document missing, there's pieces of information that are missing, what would happen is we are not going to be able to accept your submission. So at that point, basically, the process stops. We're going to notify you that you have to make the specific corrections that are needed, and until you send those corrections back to us, we're not going to be able to continue with the process. So keep that in mind. If you have questions about what needs to be included, where to find our checklists, how to upload, etc., always email us, call us. We'll be glad to help you. Our staff is very good at making sure, especially if you're a new company coming in and you don't know, walk you through the process up front so you can learn and do that without any hiccups as possible. But if you have any doubts, any questions at any time, feel free to reach out to us. We will also be available today from our intake staff. Myself and Sadie Bartlett will be here today at the end. If you do have questions, let us know. So once your plans are submitted, if everything is in place, we prepare a bill, and the turnaround times for the reviews start at the moment that the fees are paid. So it's very important also for contractors to keep in mind, keep an eye. If you're in a rush, you want your project to be reviewed as quickly as possible, make sure that the staff that does look at your Austin Bill Plus Connect account to submit payment does it regularly. That way, it would not be delayed. The date that the payment is received is the date that your turnaround time starts. And what are our turnaround times? So for fire system remodels, basically if you have an existing system and you're adding devices, removing, modifying it, it is 5 business days. And that usually applies to fire alarm sprinklers. And there's 15 business day turnaround time for new submissions. So you're installing a brand new system, it's going to be 15 business days. And miscellaneous systems such as access control, ERGs, clean agent, etc., their turnaround time is 15 business days. And that goes for both remodels and new installations. Something to keep in mind, sometimes it may be confusing to some people, but the same turnaround times apply for resubmittals of rejected plans and for revisions of approved plans. So if it's a new system that you're installing and it has a 15 business day turnaround time, that is rejected, when you resubmit, your turnaround time will be, once again, 15 business days. Our engineers were really hard to stay on top of the reviews. And get them completed within that time frame. So if you have questions about the status of your plans, you can reach out to our team. We do have some instructions in the guide that tell you how to do it yourself. You can go online and look at the status as well. But if you are not aware and you want to know how, you can email us and we can walk you through that process. Finally, when it comes to fire submissions, something I wanted to point out is, while we don't receive plans from a general contractor or from a permitting company, your role is very important and it impacts, maybe indirectly, the fire review submission. Why is that? Well, the fire system program submissions are a deferred submittal of your plan review. So the plan review, when I mean plan review, I'm talking about the review that is done through Development Services Department in order to issue your building permits. So if you are the party that's responsible for applying for building permits and getting the plan reviews approved through Development Services Department, please keep in mind that because the fire system review is a deferred submittal, it should mirror the PR. And what do I mean by mirroring? Let's say you have a multifamily residential property and it has 5 buildings, and maybe there's going to be phased occupancy, or you may have multiple systems. Our intake process is designed to accommodate all of that in one submission, and it should be one submission. So you should have one PR, one fire protection system review, and one fire protection system company working with that. And I say that because at times somebody may come to us with a submission and we tell them, oh, this plan review, this PR, had 5 building permits, or it had 3 phases, and you're just submitting 3 building permits or 1 phase. Where's the rest of it? And they may tell us, oh, well, we were awarded just this part of the project, or we are just completing this part now and the rest will be done later. So just keep that in mind. It actually is supposed to be one submission. Just think of it as if you were submitting it up front when you are applying for your building permit from Development Services Department, you'll be giving them the whole sprinkler set for what everything, that covers everything, right? So you're not having to submit your fire submission plans up front. Where you're given the opportunity to start your construction project, and while you're already ongoing, get approval from the fire department, but it should all be aligned and mirror. So one PR, one plan review submission, one contracting company. And if you have any questions about that, again, we'll be available at the end. You can send us emails. We go through this sometimes with contractors when we're receiving submissions, and we'll be more than glad to clarify any questions about it. So let's say your plans are all approved, and everything has been, all the work is completed, you're ready for inspections. How do you get your inspections scheduled? Roger Zavala, which you saw here logging in earlier, it's our scheduling coordinator, and his team handles all your inspection requests. At this time, we do not have an automated or online system to request inspections, and you are not able to request inspections through Austin Build Plus Connect. Your inspections are scheduled by calling our inspection scheduling line, which will be in your presentation. The number is 512-974-0153, option 3. And that line is open 8 to 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. Our team returns all the calls as quickly as possible. They do a great job at doing that and making sure that they respond within a business day. Most of the time within the same day, but if not, within at least a business day. And let's see. I think that covers everything for me. Again, if you have questions at the end, Krisha, Sadie, Roger, Megan, and I will be available, as well as other staff members. As Chief Volke said, if you see some of us with our badges and you have questions, feel free to come and ask us. And it's a good opportunity for us. We're glad to get to meet some of you, that we're always interacting just by email, by phone calls. It's great to put name and faces together. So please come to us if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Krisha. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate the update. As y'all can see, this is the fire protection systems, all the things related to the compliance engine. That's an area where we have we're over 30,000 systems in town now, approaching 40,000 very rapidly. And so this is an area where we need the contractors to help us, because we cannot maintain all these systems. We cannot get to all the locations. So the submissions by the contractors, the third-party inspections, and all the work that's done is extremely critical to us being able to keep up with the maintenance of all the systems in the city. So this is where we really need help from the contractors, and really need to make sure that we're getting all the things done, that we're getting the deficiencies turned in, that we're getting the deficiencies corrected, and that things are being submitted. So this is it's a great tool for us, and it's a critical tool for us to be able to get our job done. As you heard, throughout the discussion with the administrative group, they have a lot of challenges with the way things are submitted and the payment portal process and all those things, and how things are tied in with DSD and all those things. And so, we were working on these things, and we've been working on these things. COVID kind of threw a new loop in there, and we're going to continue to work on the processes. I understand when you're talking about a submittal and a resubmittal, we're at 30 days for review, right? And so, that's something we're committed to try to make sure that we stay on time, and that we, provide better than 15-day service when possible. And I think we've done a decent job over the past year of staying close to on time on most of our plan reviews, and I think we've been pretty successful. But again, success only means that, if we're going to say we're successful with the 15-day review, that means you're still, with the resubmittal, you're still looking at 30 days, right? And that's still a lot of time. And we understand, we've heard it multiple times, and we know from talking with the contractors, time is important. And time is important. And so we know that, and we're committed to try to work on these processes and working through all the things that we can do on our end to try to reduce the review times and try to make sure that we're providing the best service we possibly can. So with that, I will we'll transition into the Wildland Urban Interface Code. You'd think I know how to say that by now with as many times as I said it, but we're excited to have this code in Austin, and again, it's something that's new here, and it's new for big cities, And, we worked really closely with our Wildland division and with the International Code Council. Actually spent a lot of time working with this, as this was the first major city outside of California to adopt it. California has statewide laws for wildland. So we're excited to have this code in place. We think it really is going to add a layer of safety on the wildland side. So we'll continue to work on that. And I will turn it over to Marvin Lewis right now, who has kind of took the lead on our, not kind of, has absolutely taken the lead on our wildland urban interface on the review side, and has done a great job for us. So Marvin, come on up, and it's all yours, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marvin Lewis. I work with the engineering services here at the fire department, and we're going to go real quickly over the Wildland Urban Interface Code. Let me get this thing going here. Let's see. How come I'm not up? There it is. Okay. There you go. There's probably going to be a lot of questions on this code. If y'all will, please hold them till the end. We'll get to them as we can. I want to get through these slides with you. The Austin Fire Department, trying to get things going here. Okay. We adopted the Wildland Urban Interface Code in January of 2021. The 2015 Wildland Urban Interface Code came in, and it's a very detailed code, has a lot of things in it that really didn't fit the Austin area. In particular, defensible space didn't fit with us real well. So what we did is we really heavily amended the code to concentrate mostly on ignition-resistant construction. That being things like Class A roofs, exterior siding, hardening, decks, fences, those kinds of things, to reduce the possibility of a wildfire igniting a structure and to provide ember protection from the wildfires. Like I said, we approved the code on January 1st of 2021. It was heavily amended. This isn't following. It's not switching up here. Yeah, you want right here? Right here? It's not switching over to the slideshow.
It's not going to slideshow, yeah. Sorry, guys.
Try clicking up there, yeah. Hey,
I'll take a break and do it. Tech troubleshoot, Chief Oden.
we take our 10-minute break now.
All right, let's go ahead and take that 10-minute break now and get this electronic stuff here fixed up for you. Sorry about that.
Welcome to the Wildland Urban Interface Code. Hopefully it works this time. So, like I was saying earlier, we took the 2015 Wildland Urban Interface Code and we amended it to fit the city and the surrounding area. We did this in multiple ways. So because it's been heavily amended, before we go too much further, I want to make sure that all of y'all go out and get the amendments and the code, and make sure you go through both to get all of the effects of the actual code itself. We approved the code on January 1st, 2021. It was adopted. It was heavily amended to focus on ignition-resistant construction. We adopted it due to several things. Number one, Austin, I don't know if you guys know, but Austin is ranked number 3 in the nation right now for wildfire risk. And this is through the institution of the insurance organizations and that kind of stuff. So we are at extreme risk of having wildfires that can do a lot of damage to our community. We've also got past experience. We know about Bastrop, Steiner Ranch area, all these fires that we've had since 2011. We've got heavy fuels, and we've got the types of fuels that will burn pretty easily. So we've also got very hilly terrain. Fires like hills. They love to climb hills. And then also lately with all of the conditions with the drought, that doesn't help, obviously, the fire risk either. I know most of you guys have seen the red flag warnings. We've had a lot lately, and I think, 3 or 4 days in a row now, we've had red flag warnings because of the risk of fire, the winds, the dryness, those kinds of things. Our types of fuels, we have the old good old ash juniper, which we all call cedar trees, persimmons, pine trees. We got a lot of native grasses, yopons, and a lot more. All of this vegetation burns very easily, and it doesn't have to be dry to do it. Cedar trees or ash junipers, we know them, will burn quite well green. So just because it's green doesn't mean it won't burn. We've also got a lot of environmental concerns, and this is part of the reasons that we amended the code Austin is a very environmentally friendly area. So we've got the code, especially if we would have adopted the defensible space portions of it, we would have heavily impacted the animal species, native vegetation, those kinds of things. So we tried to work around that. And then again, our topography is really conducive for fires. We have a lot of hills, a lot of wind that goes through these hills, and then we've got obviously houses all over them. So it's a pretty conducive condition. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but we're trying our best to make sure it doesn't. As you can see, the ash juniper burns rapidly and very hot. It produces a ton of embers, and it burns even with green. And ember protection is a very important part of our strategy here. And then the grasses, they're very dry, especially during the current drought. They're very, very easily ignited. As you guys know, a cigarette thrown out of a window, a piece of glass heats up with the sun hot enough. There's lots of reasons or ways that grass can catch on fire. And it also becomes, especially with wind, because how fast it burns, it becomes a really fast-moving fire. So we're trying to get around those things. The environmental and topography, like I said, the droughts, the windstorms, lightning, all these things will contribute to wildfires. I think the Bastrop fire was started with a stroke of lightning, with a bolt of lightning, hit a power pole, sparks went everywhere. Next thing you know, we got Bastrop. So the topography, we've got hills and valleys galore. We got poor access to some of these areas, especially some of these big nature areas. If it started out in the middle of them, we got really, really poor access. And then out in some of these same areas, we got really poor water supply. So, it's going to be conducive to us to not start these fires, obviously, if we can. I mean, we may not have a choice. Mother Nature does what she wants to sometimes. Because of the environmental concerns and many other things, like I said, we focused on ignition-resistant construction, or you may hear it called structure hardening. Or hardening of the structure. It was the most cost-effective option because many of the materials that we require to be put on the houses were already being used. And for example, hardy board. Many houses already are being constructed out with hardy board, and that is a naturally non-combustible material. So that helped us a lot. Class A roofs. A Class A rated roof is required on all houses going into the Wildland urban interface. Many contractors already use Class A roofs. So when it came right down to it, a lot of the things that we thought were going to really rapidly increase the cost of the houses and stuff really didn't because it was stuff that was already being used. It also reduces the environmental impact for, like I said, for the birds, insects even. Maintains and saves more trees. Again, we defensible space. In order to adopt the defensible space portion of it, we would have had to do a lot of land clearing around structures, that kind of stuff, which would have reduced the amount of trees and those kinds of things. That also helps reduce the erosion, so we can keep our vegetation. It helps with our erosion problems and those kinds of things. And again, the emphasis not only on hardening the structures and ignition-resistant construction, but for, like I said a while ago, the ember protection. I don't know if you guys know, but embers can travel up to 1.5 miles and still ignite structures or grasses or trees or whatever. So we really wanted to concentrate on the ember protection portion of the code. We basically decided on 3 classes of ignition-resistant construction. The classes are based off the proximity to the wildland. There's 2 wildland size designations. One is 40 acres or more, and then one is 750 acres or more. And I'll show you here in just a minute. We'll go through the importance of both of those. There is a map. Go out to our website. I've got all these links at the end of the presentation. But we do have an interactive map. You can see it on the slide here. There are 2 different colors on this. There's blue and light blue, dark blue and light blue. You can't see the light blue on this, but when you expand the map, you can. So those two areas, if you're building a house or working in those two areas and you find yourself in the blue, you're going to be in the Wildland Urban Interface. Quick thing about this map is not all inclusive. Because of the way it was drawn, it is impossible to pick up every single area. So there may be some houses that we review and look at that are in the WUI that technically on the map that shows them not. But again, because of the way this map was drawn, it was pretty much impossible to get every single area. So it is not an all-inclusive map, but it's pretty close. It'll get you really, really close. So we got, for 40 acres or more, we have a Class A construction. This is 0 to 50 feet from the wildland. We have enhanced ignition resistant for basically direct flame impingement. We consider this a house that's very, very high risk from actually getting in contact with the flame itself. And then of course ember protection on all of them. The Class B is 50 to 150 feet. It is enhanced ignition resistant construction, and we're trying to protect it a little bit more from radiant heat. That's flame that gets pretty close to the house but not touching it, but can still heat it up pretty good. And then again, ember protection. And then the Class C is, which is basically anything from 150 feet out to 1.5 miles of 750 acres more of contiguous wildland. I'm going to start with the Class C and work backwards, because the Class C, and then you add on to C as we go back. So it kind of seems a little out of order, but there's a method to my madness here. Structures located 150 feet to 1.5 miles from 750 acres or more of continuous wildland are considered Class C construction. The Class C requirements, I'm not going to go into all of the individual requirements. You see the code sections that I've got at each of them. You can look at these codes and see. So the first one's a Class A roof covering. A Class A roof covering is required on every house going into the wildland, regardless of whether it's in A, B, or C. Roof and wall vent protection, this is also required in all houses. Basically, this is 1/8 inch non-combustible, non-corrosive wire mesh of some kind that goes over your vents, such as bathroom vents, roof vents, ridge vents. These kinds of things all require the ember protection from the screens. Dryer vents are excluded from that, and any vent, like a plumbing vent that goes down into where it gets into water, like all your plumbing vents do not have to be covered on your roof, because the vents go down and get to a P-trap where there's water in them and stuff, so that's not a big deal. Gutters and downspouts. All gutters have to be metal, and they also all have to have leak protection. Some type of non-combustible leak protection, whether it be a wire screen on top of them, however you want to do it, again, they have to be protected. Appendages and structures, this is in particular decks and balconies, but really more in particular decks. Decks, because of the way they're built and the wood, they dry out, they see a lot of sunlight, they get heavily deteriorated over time, and embers can pretty much cause these things to ignite pretty easily. So we've got some pretty good restrictions on decks, and then fences, same thing. Fences can ignite, travel up to the house and ignite the house. So what we're doing here is any fence within 5 foot of the house has to be built to a non-combustible type material, whether it be wrought iron or something of that nature. And then spark arresters for chimneys. Most chimneys come automatically with spark arresters, but some of them do not, so they all require spark arresters on the chimneys. Class B, basically Class B is one step above the Class C. It has to have everything Class C had, plus it has to have the vents, the soffits protected. And this is in case the fire gets up close to our house, it can stop or help reduce the heat getting into the attic. And as you all know, if you've been in an attic that's a 10, 15-year-old attic, it's dry, it's hot, it's a big tinder can itself. So we're trying to stop that heat from getting in, those hot gases from getting up into that attic. Class A. Now, Class A is the most restrictive. This is actually, these two pictures are really, I thought, a pretty good example of a Class A structure. This is a structure that fire can get right up to that structure, and it can still survive that fire because of the enhanced construction. Your eaves, soffits, fascias, and rafter tails all have to be non-combustible or wrapped with non-combustible materials. Your soffits and your vents can't be ventilated. You can't have any kind of vents in your soffits, so your embers and the gases can't get up through your vents. Your exterior walls have to be built either to 1 hour rating, or they have to be built with all non-combustible exterior siding. That could be hardy board, brick, stone, stucco, something that's totally non-combustible. Your windows all have to be either tempered glass or double pane low E glass, or 20-minute rated glass, a fire rated glass. Then the doors also have to be protected. They can be a 1 3/4 inch solid wood door without glazing. If you do have glazing in the glass, they have to meet the glazing requirements. You can also have 20-minute fire rated doors on these and those kinds of things. And then any enhanced protection for detached accessory structures. So what we're talking about here is if you got a storage building, outbuilding, a shed, a barn, or whatever that is, if it's within 50 feet of that structure, the main structure, then it has to be protected in the same manner. And again, this is just to keep these things from catching on fire from either direct flame impingement or the ember protection. Site and infrastructure requirements. The site plans and stuff we do on commercial property already. When we adopted the WUI code, obviously site has become a real important part of construction for a residential neighborhood now because of the proximity to the wildland, the type of fuels, the slopes, the hills, those kinds of things. So we basically do a little bit of a site plan on the residential structures now, so we can find out where it sits, what's close to it, how close the stuff is. So anytime you turn in a residential review, it needs to have a site plan. The site plan needs to look something about like what it is now, showing us where the house sits on the property, so we can tell exactly how close that house is going to be to the wildland when it's done, so we can determine on what class of construction that you're going to have. Excuse me. We do have one class of construction or one class of site we call extreme hazard. These houses will not be allowed to be built on at all unless we mitigate some of these hazards. Those hazards are no water supply, no access, heavy or medium fuels, and slopes of 10% or more. So if we get a lot like that and we don't have water within so many feet of it, we don't have proper access to that house, those kinds of things, we will not approve that permit until we get something fixed to mitigate some of those problems. This is the one spot that we will allow some defensible space. We will work with you for defensible space around these particular projects. So far we haven't seen one, but I'm fairly certain we will before it's over with. Somebody's going to try to put a house where you shouldn't put a house, right? Or where you shouldn't put anything, basically, but it's going to happen at some point. Defensible space, and I think you'll see why a little bit around Austin, why we don't really allow defensible space. Not necessarily don't allow it, but we try to shy away from it. It's the environmental concerns. The tree people don't like us cutting all their trees. The environmental folks don't like us removing the trees and all the other things that happens when you clear property. So the defensible space is there. It's in Chapter 6 of the Wildland Urban Interface Code. You cannot use defensible space in place of ignition-resistant construction. So you can come up to us and say, we've talked to environmental trees. They say we can clear our property out to 100 feet. Do we have to do all this stuff? And we're going to say, yep. Still got to do it. So you can't use ignition-resistant construction. You can't use defensible space in place of. So like I said, basically defensible space is kind of reserved to that those areas where we absolutely have it to mitigate an issue. And we all look at that on case-by-case basis. Inspections, typically now there are going to be 2 inspections required. One is basically at the same stage as your frame inspection, so kind of keep that in mind. If you're going to call in your main frame inspection from DSD, you need to call in that first WUI inspection as well, because what these guys are going to be looking at then is they're going to be looking at your screens, your vent screens, your ember protection on your roofs, They're going to be making sure you got the right roof covering on it, those kinds of things. And then the second one is the final. It'll be basically called in before your building final so that the fire can come out and make sure that everything's done, tightened up, buttoned up properly. And we've got all the proper exterior sidings if we had to look for those kinds of things. And then call inspections, like I think Natalie was talking about a while ago, we still do not have anything automated on inspections, so still call the 9740153. I forgot the option 3 here, but it is option 3, or so make sure that you call those in, and please guys, make sure you call them in, because if you don't and we get out there and you didn't call in that first inspection, then it's costly to cut out sheetrock. So we really don't want to have that happen, but we need to make sure these things are built properly. We do have a team of dedicated WUI inspectors. Captain Carlo ran off on me somewhere. Oh, there he is. I think there's 3 inspectors, right? 3 or 4?
There's actually a total of 6.
6. So we've got plenty of inspectors out there. So we did this so we would not do our best not to slow down the schedules. But a lot of that's going to be on you guys. Y'all got to call these inspections in at the right times. Like I said, the wall inspection, the frame inspection before you, even at the same time you call in your DSD inspection. And then don't forget that final. There will be some that you only have to have 1 inspection on, but we'll work on those occasionally, like a pool. If you put a pool with a deck in around it, as a remodel, typically we don't need 2 inspections on that, those kinds of things. But just call us. If you have any questions whatsoever, just call that number. We are fixing to start working on the 2021 Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is, in fact, I think next week we're going to start working on it. We'd love to hear from you guys. If y'all have any ideas, any suggestions, especially about materials and where we can get them, where we can find them, that would be great. We're basically fixing a few mistakes that were made to begin with. I mean, anytime you open up a new code, things are going to happen. You're going to get into the code 6 months down the road and realize, oops, we should have fixed that. So we're fixing things. We're clarifying code and code amendments. We're clarifying the boundaries. This is why I kind of wanted to tell you up front that map was not all inclusive. We're going to put that in code actually. So that everybody knows. And then we expect to have the adoption somewhere around January 2022. Could be a few months later, could be a few months earlier, but somewhere around that general vicinity. And then we also have the 2021 Fire Code WUI criteria manual coming as well. So this can help a lot. You guys can look at our criteria manual, see how we interpret the code, and what we require and those kinds of things. Thank you very much, guys. That's all I have on the slides. Here is all of the links. There's a link to the Fire Marshal's office, a link to the Wildland Urban Interface site, and then on the Urban Interface site, you really may want to. There's some really good material out there. There's the proximity lookup zones. There's the interactive WUI web map. There's the printable map. There's a 2015 base International Wildland Urban Interface Code and the amendments. And we also have for y'all's convenience a WUI approved materials list. So there is a list out there that you can download that we're updating constantly that has materials on it that we have looked at, we have studied, we have researched, and they're automatically pretty much approved to be used. So if you've got any questions about that, you just go look at the WAP. And also, we really appreciate if you guys find some stuff that, hey, can we use this? This looks like a pretty good product. Please feel free to send that information to us. We'll look at it. If it meets our criteria, we could add it to our approved materials list. That's all I got. Questions and answers? Questions? Hopefully answers? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you said that using a sprinkler system didn't count as a mitigation for some of those factors. I'm just wondering why that would be that.
Well, sprinkler systems, for one, don't do much good for embers. They just fly over and that kind of stuff. Second is it would also be, in order to my opinion anyway, it would almost be something that you'd have to require on every house, and you can't do that. So, anything else? All right, that's all I got. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Marvin. Yeah, and the sprinklers, for the, you would basically have to have the outside of your house on fire and it get into the inside of your house before the sprinklers would kick in. So it's, for this, like Marvin said, we have a lot of competing interests in town here, and so focusing on ignition resistant construction was definitely the way to go for us. And as we looked at the cost related to it, one thing the ignition resistant construction does is it's there, and it's not going to grow back like the vegetation. When we started looking at the energy codes and some of those other things, the windows and doors and a lot of those things to meet the energy code also met the WUI code. We also recognized that a lot of the sidings and things that were being used also fell within that. And so we decided to really focus on the ignition resistant construction. And, it's kind of revolutionary what our team did here was expanding out to that 1.5 miles for ember protection, because that's really what's going to save houses, because we know when we have wildland fires that you have, those embers moving up to 1.5 miles, and you have, several blocks in from the edge of the fire, you have structures randomly, catching on fire from the embers. It's just luck. Where do the embers land with your house? So putting these things in place we've shown at some of the fires that we've seen over the last several years, about a 50% reduction in structural loss with the code. So that's a huge deal. And like Marvin mentioned, the CoreLogic study that showed that Austin was the third or fourth highest risk city. We've kind of been skating along the last couple of years. We only had 5 or 6 red flag days last year. We've had 7 already this year, and we had 3 this week. So, it's one of those things that's up and down, ebb and flow. We kind of forget about it, and then here it is back again. And it's something that we constantly know we're going to run into. So, and Marvin also mentioned the map. And so one of the things with the map is is a tool that we use. It's not the sole decider of everything. Obviously, as development occurs, the WUI is pushed out, and so the map's constantly changing. We're working really closely with DSD on the intake side, especially on the residential side, something that we really hadn't done much of before. So working in the residential very heavily is new to us, and so we're working with them to try to make sure that we're capturing these things on the intake process. And some of those things are outside of our control, but we're doing the best we can to capture everything, and the team's done a good job of reaching out to the contractors. So if you have issues or concerns, reach out to our team. We're always glad to talk, always glad to help. So I'll kind of leave it right there with the Wildland Urban Interface Code. And again, y'all reach out to Marvin, to myself. We'll be around. We got, we're kind of on the front end of this one. So there's not a lot of experience from other departments. So we're excited where we are with it. So our next presenter is going to be Lieutenant Brian Knox. He's going to talk to us about high-rise phasing. Lieutenant Knox has been doing high-rises here for several years, and he's our guy that we refer to as the resident expert, especially in phasing. And any of you haven't worked with him, he's definitely knowledgeable and has some tips that will help you stay on track with your project and help reduce the amount of time it takes to get things done. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Knox. Thank you, sir.
What's that? Okay. Close it down. There we go. Okay. Morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm Lieutenant Brian Knox. I've been with the Austin Fire Department for 20 years. I've been with the Prevention Department for 5. And during that 5 years, I've been primarily responsible for the downtown area. And, obviously, if you're familiar with the downtown area, I've done a lot of high rises. So 5 years worth. Anyway, anybody watch the Oscars this weekend? I didn't either. But I woke up the next morning, my mom doesn't live with me. My wife explained to me that Chris Rock apparently made a joke about Will Smith's wife's hair. And so Will Smith promptly went up on stage and slapped the taste out of Chris Rock's mouth. So in the interest of civility, I won't make any jokes about anybody's hair, as long as you don't make any jokes about mine. And we can all go back to our Facebook pages and mark ourselves safe from Will Smith today. I'm just kidding. I don't have a Facebook either, so that was all a joke. What defines a high-rise? The IBC defines a high-rise as a building over 75 feet above the lowest level of a fire department vehicle access. What's that mean? Your main entrance, if your main entrance is at the street level, but you have a parking lot in the back of the building that's 2 stories below where the main entrance is, that's where your 75 feet's from. So you may only be five floors above the main entrance, but 3 floors below, which is going to make you over 75 feet. So you're going to be subject to the rules of a high-rise. The characteristics of a high-rise, you're going to have a lot more requirements for your high-rise. The most notable is the presence of stairwell pressurization fans. The stairwell pressurization fans are there to pressurize the stairwells, obviously, so that people leaving the building will be able to do so in a smoke-free environment. So basically, when you open a door, if there's smoke in the hall, the pressurization in the stairwells is going to keep that from entering the stairwell. You're going to have a fire pump, and you're also going to be required to have secondary power for that fire pump, which means that you're going to have a generator, which opens a whole nother string of inspections that we'll get to later here. Typically, you're going to have stacked electrical rooms. If they're not stacked, you're going to run into problems. The main reason for having the stacked electrical rooms is to supply a 2-hour survivability pathway for alarm systems, electrical systems, emergency responder communication enhancement systems. All of those things are probably going to be installed or ran through your stacked electrical rooms. For buildings over 120 feet, so that's our next step from 75 is 120. You're going to have the additional requirement of having fire service access elevators. That's a whole can of worms that I'd be happy to get into with you after class, but just know that if it's over 120 feet tall, that you're going to have fire service access elevators. This picture here is of the South by Southwest Center that was commissioned in 2021. It's at the corner of 1401 Lavaca Street. That was a Harvey Clary building. He did a nice job. Different types of high rises. Primarily what we're going to see here in Austin is your office shell. Your office shell is typically going to be a garage and an empty building with a lobby and finished bathrooms. Maybe you even have finished elevator lobbies. Sometimes the new Google building downtown at 601 West 2nd Street doesn't even have finished elevator lobbies. They're finished, but they're not decoratively finished. We're also going to have hotels and residential high-rises. Those are R1 and R2. Your hotels are R1, apartments and condos are R2. We see a lot of those. However, what we're seeing a lot now, because the buildings keep getting taller and taller, is mixed-use commercial. That's any level or any combination of business occupancies and residential occupancies. The new 6X building that's going in at 6th and Guadalupe is, I believe, 67 floors. It's got garage for 16, the next 17 Facebook just rented out for office space. Above that, they're going to have hotel, and above that, they're going to have residential apartments. So they've got the whole thing, and you can imagine they're definitely going to want to do some phasing. So I'm waiting to get that call any day now. So high-rise office shells. They're typically not phased because of the way they're permitted. Most of the time, it doesn't matter how tall it is. In fact, that new Google building that I was referring to on 2nd Street has 2 permits, or 2 building permits for the entire building. So it's got one for the garage and one for the shell office building. So it makes it easier for us, but it's hard to phase that. You're either done or you're not done. Some of the common questions when it comes to office shells are can tenant improvements begin prior to shell completion? As much as we would like to keep you from doing that, you can begin tenant improvements prior to shell completion once you have issued and approved permits. So building permits, that is. We advise you to use the same sprinkler and alarm contractors when you're doing that. And a lot of the developers are even incorporating that into their contracts with their clients, because the more contractors you have touching equipment, it nullifies the warranties, and it's just not. It confuses the effort. You have a lot more contractors on site. It just gets more confusing. When can demo begin? Demo can begin as soon as you have approved permits. If you don't have approved permits, you can apply for a demolition permit. Once you have a demolition permit, you can start demoing on the individual floors that you're working on. What I will advise you of is that if you're demoing anything that is considered part of the shell building's fire protection systems, that's going to have to be reinstalled before the shell is going to be approved. That means that if your project is done prior to the completion of the shell building, you're not going to be able to move in. So nobody's going to meet their contractual obligation if things get removed before they get tested. So that's a pretty critical item. It's happened a few times where the initial core contractor had to stick around to the very end until components that were removed got added back in. So it's pretty important. It's good to communicate that with between the tenant finish out contractor and the general contractor. Can we stock prior to shell completion? There is no stocking prior to shell completion. However, if you're installing equipment that has to pass another trades inspection, like for instance, if you've got workstations that are hardwired into the building itself, and that has to be inspected by the electrical inspector, those can be built and installed prior to the issuance of a TCO for stocking. But no chairs, nothing ancillary, nothing that rolls around. It's just that equipment that's required to be there for the additional trade inspection. High-rise hotels and apartments. These are the ones that you're going to most likely be wanting to phase. They have some unique issues, especially hotels, and furnished apartments as well have the same issues as hotels. They take a considerable amount of time to stock and train their employees. That's going to be something that if you're doing the work for a high-rise hotel, you're going to have to factor in that training and stocking time into your matrix when it comes to the work that you're doing. It seems like they want about 2 months to stock and train, so that's going to cut into your schedule pretty good. Just like in the office buildings, some of the furniture is going to be required by the electrical inspector, or I guess maybe mechanical or plumbing. If it is required to be installed in order to pass your trade inspections, then we're going to allow you to go ahead and install that. Some of that would be, for example, a lot of headboards have hardwired outlets in them, or their lamps and I guess just lamps, TVs, things that are hardwired in. Those things are going to, with prior approval will let you install those things prior to getting a stocking TCO. And again, there's no stocking prior to 100% of the shell building approval. High-rise mixed use. That's going to be a combination, like I said, of any R and B occupancy. These are like almost without fail, they're going to be looking for approval prior to receiving their full TCO. So you're going to be stocking, like I said, the building at 6th and Guadalupe. You're looking at office space. Facebook's got that. They're very fast paced. As soon as they're done with their shell, or excuse me, as soon as they're done with the shell, they're going to want their office spaces phased in. We have a mechanism for that, but it takes a lot of communication on your part, and you have to initiate that conversation. We're not going to come to you to try to help you phase. You have to come to us with a plan, and then we'll try to help you in the safest way possible initiate that plan. They have the same issues as hotels with stocking. It's, again, there's hotels inside of these mixed-use high-rises. Again, you're going to see a common theme here. The building has to be 100% tested and approved, the shell building. And we're going to get into what that exactly means when, regarding the shell building. But as you can see, they all have to be done prior to any TCO level. You got to have an approved plan to separate residents from construction. So let's use the 6X for example again. Once Facebook gets in there, then the hotel comes in. You have to be able to have a plan where you're using stairwells or elevators where you're not commingling work and construction with the residents or the transient residents of the hotel. So that's going to be a plan that you have to come to us with. We'll approve it, and we'll come inspect it once you've implemented the plan. Egress for all exits. That's one of the toughest things, as you probably know, that because most of the work's being done, most of the laydowns being done on the ground level, it's very hard to get egress out of your required exits. So that's probably that, and the first floor lobby egress is probably the biggest obstacle that you're going to run against when it comes to phasing upper floors. So this is what entails a 100% shell building completion. I'm going to go over the tests that have to take place. Some of them have to take place in a specific order. Others can be moved around. I'll try to address the ones that have to be done in a specific order. This particular one, the underground hydrostatic test, doesn't have to be done first, but I will tell you that the sprinkler company will appreciate it if it does get done first, because they can use the water from the city to fill their pipes for their hydrostatic tests while the building's being built. It takes a long time for them to fill them with a garden hose. So underground hydro is going to be something you want to get taken care of very soon. It consists of a 200 PSI test from the valve at the street to the stub end of the building. For some reason, there's been a number of buildings who, because the connection to city water has been in the right of way, that they didn't have to pull a plumbing permit. That is, prior to us doing the hydrostatic test, we're going to require you to pull a permit for that. So once the piping enters the building, then it's required to have a plumbing permit, and it should be specific to the fire line. The description should say fire line in the plumbing permit. Again, that must be permitted. Sprinkler visual and hydrostatic tests. All sprinklers must be visually and hydrostatically tested prior to being covered. Prior to being covered. So again, like Marvin said, tearing out sheetrock is expensive, so we need to get those inspections done before you start sheetrocking. The hydrostatic and visual tests are going to be called in by your sprinkler contractor. Most high-rises have at least one inspection per floor, it seems like, and they call those in each time. So if you've got, say, a business shell where the shell office space is just an expanse of space and doesn't really require any sheetrock, we can look at that almost any time. But the bathrooms, you're going to want a sheetrock. So we're going to need to get called in before you sheetrock those. We can look at one floor at a time. We can look at 5 floors at a time. But depending on your schedule, you have to have a lot of communication with your sprinkler contractor. As far as hydrostatic tests go, we don't have to do that at the time of your hard lid sprinkler inspection. We can do that later. So we can do, it's just any combination of hydrostatic and visual tests we're willing to do, as long as we can keep you guys up with your schedule and you're not afraid to pay the $265 return fee every time. So it does get a little expensive when you're having each floor individual. Well, if you had 2 inspections for each floor, that'd be pretty costly on a 50-story high-rise. This includes standpipes and horizontal piping as well. That's normally going to get tested closer to the very end when we're looking at when the entire standpipe system has been installed. We will test the horizontal and vertical piping all the way back to the FDCs. So hazmat inspection. So the hazmat inspection is primarily, the one I'm talking about right here, is to put diesel into the generator. So this is going to be one of those scenarios where these inspections have to take place in order. You have to get your hazmat inspection so you can put diesel into your generator. You have to have diesel for your generator in order for you to get your load bank test. You have to have your load bank test before we will schedule your fire pump test. You have to have your fire pump test before we'll schedule your PRV testing or your standpipe flow test. So this is one of those scenarios where it's critical that you get this hazmat inspection applied for by the ownership. The ownership has to apply for the hazmat permit, and then you have to get on board with getting this inspection. If it's an interior generator, you're going to have to be inspected by an AFD hazmat engineer. So that's, and hopefully they're under 660 gallons. Whole nother can of worms if they're not. So, so in addition to that being inspected by a hazmat engineer, you're going to have sprinklers in the area of the generator and the floor above and floor below, depending on the situation, but at least the generator area and the floor above. And it's going to have to be monitored off-site for water flow. That means if over the weekend your diesel catches fire, you have a water flow, the off-site monitoring is going to notify the general contractor and AFD or 911, and 911 is going to send a fire engine as a result of that water flow alarm. So there's the generator load bank test. That's going to take place by a third party. Once you get that load bank test, forward it to your inspector. The inspector is going to forward it to an AFD engineer for review. And then once you have the load bank test and it's been approved by an AFD engineer, then we can schedule your fire pump test. Fire pump acceptance test. It will not be scheduled until the load bank tests have been reviewed, as I said earlier. So once the fire pump acceptance test has been scheduled and we show up, you're going to have your pump rep there. Again, this is going to be something that's going to be requested by your sprinkler company. Everything so far, other than the hazmat inspection, will have been by the sprinkler company. The hazmat inspection is going to be requested by the general contractor or the electrical engineer. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm not involved with that one, so I'm not sure who actually does that one.
Scott said you're right.
Yeah, okay, good deal. So we'll show up there. You're going to have your area clear around your test headers, which are normally right outside the pump room, because we're going to be dumping as up to 1,500 gallons potentially of water in your area. So you want to have that area clear and hopefully, at least have some hardscape around there so we're not washing out your foundation. Once we have the pump accepted, we can do a standpipe reconnaissance inspection. We look at a lot of things. We're looking at the entire componentry of the standpipes and getting a lot of information that is mostly for us. But the primary thing I'm looking for at a standpipe reconnaissance inspection is, do we have access for our fire engines to be there? Depending on the size of your building, if it's greater than, if the requirement for PSI is greater than 225, we're going to have 2 fire engines there. So that's going to be one of the things I'm considering as well. For the most part, you're going to need the majority of your hardscape in and around the vicinity of your FDCs is going to have to be complete, and we're going to have available approach for at least 1, if not 2 fire engines. When I say availability to the FDCs, that includes scaffolding. It includes giant holes in front of the FDC that got dug up because they needed to access the valve under there. So we basically want the area around the FDC to be totally clear. Once we do the standpipe recon, we can schedule the standpipe flow test. The standpipe flow test is a minimum of 2 weeks to get scheduled. That's on any building, whether you're building a high-rise or a 4-story apartment building. If you've got a standpipe, from the time that we do the standpipe reconnaissance, it's going to be a minimum of 2 weeks. And that just has to do with the number of people's hands that has to touch. It goes up the chain of command, goes across the chain of command, and comes back down the chain of command. So you can imagine in a pretty big department like this, it touches a lot of hands. So just keep that in mind when you're scheduling, that it's going to take about 2 weeks. Standpipe flow test. So once we get you scheduled, we're going to show up. Again, at the standpipe reconnaissance, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to require road closures. If we're going to require load closures, we're going to have to work together to try to come up with a date, because the right-of-way department will not let you have a road closure unless you have a date for the road closure. And I need to know that your road closure is approved so I can schedule my fire engines to show up. So it takes a little coordination, but as everybody knows, you got to keep the right-of-way department happy. That's not always easy. Once we get the standpipe flow test done, we can test all your pressure-reducing valves. The main requirement for that is we need to be able to get up and down the stairwells. If there's scaffolding all throughout the stairwells, I'm not going to schedule it because it's not time appropriate. It's going to take far too long to work around all the scaffolding to try to get to your PRVs. Stairwell pressurization testing. So again, buildings over 75 feet are required to have stairwell pressurization. These are all going to be conducted by a third party that has been approved as a vendor by the Austin Fire Department. There's quite a few of them. If you need a source, let me know. I've got a list of them. If it's somebody that we work with a lot, we may or may not be there to witness how their procedures for the stairwell pressurization. If it's somebody that's from out of town that we haven't worked with, we're probably going to want to be there for at least a couple of hours. It's a very common question. If this, most of the most of the companies that do the stairwell pressurization are want to do it after hours because you can't have doors opening and closing while you're trying to do your testing. So it makes it easier on them to do it after hours. And, we can help, that's why we're not going to stay the entire time. That's a long day. So we may witness it or we may not. The Special Inspections Agency report. Now, this is going to be very important to you closer to the end of your project. This is the report generated by the company who does your stairwell pressurization. The entire report consists primarily of the results of the stairwell pressurization after it's been adjusted, and every single initiating device that starts the stair press fans. So you're looking at smoke detectors, water flow devices. That's pretty much it. But there's a lot of them. Anywhere you got a smoke detector or a water flow, which you're going to have at least one water flow device on every floor. All of those items have to be tested by me, and they have to be tested by the Special Inspections Agency that you contract, that the ownership contracts to do their Special Inspections Agency report. Those can either be done, they can be, the Special Inspections Agency can do theirs on their own, or they can do them with us. I personally don't mind doing them with them because they've got a lot of good insight when it comes to the mechanical systems in the building, more so than we do. So once that Special Inspections Agency report is completed, that report gets uploaded to the compliance engine, which gets added to the Amanda system. Once it's added to the Amanda system, it gets assigned to an AFD engineer who then has 15 days to review it. So although the 15-day review is the standard, know that there's some steps that happen prior to that clock starting. So I normally say you should try to factor in a month to get that approved. And the key issue on this report is that no inspector is allowed to approve any level of TCO for the shell building or tenant finish outs prior to the approval of the Special Inspections Agency report, the SIA report. That report also needs to be, once it's prior to being uploaded into the compliance engine, it has to be submitted to the engineer of record who has to approve it from his standpoint. Then it gets sent back to the SIA reporting agency, and then they upload it. So it's a few steps. So I say, try to factor in a month's time. So alarm testing. This is the bulk of our testing at the end. So, and this is something that we typically do alongside the Special Inspections Agency. Because we're requiring that approved report, it's very common that people want to start testing before we are NFPA 72 Chapter 17 compliant. Chapter 17 in NFPA 72 states that where detection is not required during construction, devices will not be added until it is a dust-free environment. Now, dust-free is a pretty stringent term, and we're willing to look at it, where you're at, depending on the stage of your construction. But for the most part, we need a clean environment so the alarm companies can snap in their devices, and we can test so where they're not being degraded along the way. We normally start off with sprinkler-related alarms. That's tampers, flows, dry systems, high-low alarms, dry system trip tests, pre-action systems, and pollution control units. A typical 35-story high-rise office shell, you're probably looking at 2 days alone just testing sprinkler-related equipment. Mechanical related equipment, that's the variable. Every building has its own issues with mechanical. Some buildings have office buildings that are not shells but built as buildings. They could have as many as 50, 60 duct detectors on a floor. If there's 50, 60 duct detectors on a floor, that floor is probably going to take half a day, just that floor alone, because we test everyone. The units have to be running when we test them so we can see them shut down. So obviously, this is going to be later on in the game. If they're controlled by a central unit, all of the programming has to be done prior to us inspecting those duct detectors. The fire alarm system. So once we get, typically speaking, after the sprinkler-related alarms are completed, we'll do mechanical and alarms like smoke detectors and stuff per floor. So if you've got 3 fire smoke dampers on a floor, a smoke detector in the electrical room, and a duct detector on your AHU in the mechanical room, we'll test all 3 of those things at the same time. And then we'll just go down, or whatever floor is the most finished is where we'll start, and we'll just work up to floors that aren't finished. And when it gets too dirty, then we'll stop. So normally, that's the way it goes. So a lot more alarm testing. Elevator recall. So we're not going to start elevator recall until all the elevators in a bank, in a bank, have been inspected and approved by the TDLR state elevator inspector. So when we come back to do elevator recall testing, we're going to require there to be an elevator technician there, an alarm technician there, and we're going to require that all of the elevators in that bank are running at the same time. So, it's most of the time when I ask people what's holding them up on their project, it's the elevator company. So obviously, like I see a lot of heads nodding, yeah. So at least we blame it on the elevator company anyway. So that's going to be something that's going to take place closer to the end. A lot of times our floors are done prior to that. Area of refuge phones are something that doesn't have to be tested prior to the uploading of the SIA report. So normally we'll put that off closer to the end because we've got that 21-day to 30-day buffer of time that we're waiting to get the SIA report approved that we can work on area of refuge phones. And fire phones for buildings that were permitted prior to September 1st, 2021. So generator transfer test is, there's not much to it. It's pretty much we're just testing to ensure that all the transfer switches work and that the the fire and life safety systems, ATS, transfers over in less than 10 seconds. We're normally going to do this test at the time of the sequence test. So that way you only have to have your generator technician out one time. So normally it's not an issue. As long as the generator technician's there, if there's any issues, we're normally able to work them out on site during the sequence test. So that leads us to the sequence test. This is basically the coup de grace. This is the comprehensive test at the end. It's every one of your fire and life safety systems, including elevators, on secondary power. The building's going to be pretty darn close to being done. And this can be done during that time period where we're waiting to get the Special Inspections Agency report approved. So we can get it done. If we started early, if there's any issues, it's about 50% of the time sequence tests pass the first time. So it's not uncommon for them to fail. And that's, personally, I find it refreshing when they do fail. It means that something that I did along the way was worth it. So, however, if we can work it out at the time of the inspection, we'll do it then. If not, we have to reschedule. The problem with sequence test rescheduling is that everybody has to be there. Electrical, mechanical, controls, generator tech, electrician, general contractors, alarm contractors, sprinkler contractors. We have to get everybody there all at one time and hopefully not interfere with your job site too much. We will typically schedule them later in the afternoon so you can give the rest of the job site the day off after lunch, because we're going to kill power at the switchgear to the building. We're not going to use the ATS. We're going to kill power at the switchgear, and basically the building will be on generator power only. And then once we get done with our sequence test and we've proven that all the fire and life safety systems operate appropriately on generator power, we're going to kill the generator with the EPO, and we're going to test the required battery lights depending on what type of building you have. For stairwells in business and R1 occupancies, you're required to have tertiary power on your stairwell lighting. So that's when we're going to test to ensure that your all of the areas required to have battery backup lights are in place and working. So emergency responder communication enhancement systems. I'm not going to get into this. Edward's going to get into this afterwards. I just want to say that this system is integral to emergency responders responding to buildings in downtown areas, because of the repeaters are blocked consistently. You've got garages that are 6 feet underground. We're not going to be able to talk without the emergency responder communication enhancement system. This is something that has recently changed with the adoption of the 2021 code. Previously, if you had wired firefighter phones, you would be allowed to get a temporary certificate of occupancy with your fire phones, and you would have 2 years to install your emergency responder or your DAS system. Once we adopted the 2021 code on September 1st of 2021, we no longer allow that. You're going to have your emergency responder communication enhancement system installed and operational prior to any level of TCO. So we've said TCO a ton of times. There's basically 3 different levels of fire final inspections. The inspection's the same, but at the end you can either fail, or there's the potential that if you paid for a TCO for stocking, that we can approve a TCO for stocking. If you paid for a TCO for occupancy, we can potentially approve a TCO for occupancy. Or if everything's good to go, then we can sign off on a fire final. Those are the levels that we're looking for. So that's kind of where your phasing comes in, to some degree. So in order to get stocking, you have to have all sprinkler system control valves in the open position. That's throughout the entire building, not just the floors that you're, it might be just the floors that you're, I'll have to think about that one. But definitely the floor that you're trying to get approved for stocking has to have the control valves open for the sprinklers. Fire alarm systems must be monitored off-site with general contractor contact information. Unless you've got a building engineer already on site, the general contractor is going to be the point of contact for any alarm activations, whether they be general alarms or supervisory alarms. And if you work something out with your alarm tech that they're going to be that point of contact, that's fine too. I just want to know that when the alarm goes off, that somebody that knows what's going on is being contacted. Knox box must have keys to access the building, pump room, fire control room, and elevator penthouse. So all the keys that we're going to require, the 10 sets in the fire command room, not required for stocking, but we got to be able to get inside the building, and we got to be able to get to the fire command room and to the floors that we may be having issues with. All signs for critical areas installed, that's fire command room, pump room, elevator machine room, electrical rooms. All extinguishers must be installed with current inspection tags. And stocking-related trash must be removed at the end of each day. That one's very important because all that cardboard trash adds to the fire load of the floor that isn't necessarily factored into the hazard when we're talking about an office shell or a hotel. There's a lot of associated cardboard, as I'm sure you can imagine. So then our next level is temporary certificate of occupancy for occupancy. If stocking began prior to the occupancy, I'm going to need you to be done with your stocking before I approve the occupancy. Meaning that, you just needed some things to get done on your trades before you could apply for occupancy, but they weren't ready yet, so you went ahead and you wanted to start stocking, and we allowed that. If the stocking is still going on, it makes it really challenging for us to do another inspection while there's 100 people on the floor putting together beds and hopefully removing trash. So we're gonna require that all stocking must be complete for that floor, and I'm specifically thinking of hotels right now. So we don't want half the hotel floor being stocked while the other half people are paying to rent rooms. Must have clear egress made through all exit corridors. That's exiting the building and exiting the floors. Access control must be approved or de-energized until approved. That means if you've got access control that hasn't been inspected yet, we're going to expect you to de-energize that equipment so we're not preventing egress or ingress for that matter. Knox gate switches must be installed on all gates, and gates must remain open. So if you don't have your Knox gate switches, you're going to have to leave those gates open, and whether you add security or not, that's an additional cost to you. Fire Command Center must be fully outfitted in accordance with IFC Section 508. I won't get into that because that's a whole nother book of worms. Or book of worms? No. Can of worms. Emergency responder communication enhancement system installed and approved for permits issued after September 1st, 2021. Then you got your fire final. In order to obtain fire final, basically, you have to be done. Just finish the job. All trade permits have to be final. All access control must be installed and approved, so no more de-energizing. If it's there, it has to work. Permanent building key cores must be installed. I know that creates an issue for some people because those are supplied by the ownership typically. Just know that until they supply you with those core keys, that we're not going to issue a fire final, or we're not going to approve a fire final. Construction materials shall be removed from the garage. So all the laydown equipment and materials that are in the garage need to be removed. If it's attic stock, it needs to be consolidated and put in an area that's agreeable to the building inspector. Again, the emergency responder communication enhancement permits issued, it has to be installed if it's after September 1st, 2021. So that's a little bit wrong right there. I meant to correct that. So the date between September 1st and January 1st also applies. All right, so finally to the end. Those are all the buildings that are going in Austin. There's currently 30 high-rises in Austin under construction or in the plan review. Somebody said 40 earlier, and I believe that was talking about probably included the ones that are currently topped out and in the phasing stages. But the ones that are currently under construction, there are 30, and in planning stages, right at about 30. 7 of those are over 700 feet tall, which would make them, any 7, the tallest building in Austin right now. The Independent's 590, so that's 690, excuse me. So that's one of them, well, I think that's my next slide, nope. The Waller Creek project at 98 Red River is 1,024 feet tall. We haven't agreed on how many floors that's gonna be yet, but as you can imagine, that'll be our first building in town that has pumps on 3 different levels. As Ashley was talking about earlier, the secondary pumps on the upper floors of the Independent, we're gonna have tertiary pumps on the 65th floor-ish of the Waller Creek project. So they're not getting any smaller, they're just getting ever bigger. So it's gonna be critical for contractors to communicate what their intention is for phasing early on and to come up with a plan. I'll try to help you the best of my ability with your plan to try to create a seamless implementation, but the bulk of the work's going to be on the contractor. So it's not impossible, but it's going to take a lot of communication and a lot of planning. Do I have any questions on anything that we've covered or anything pertaining to your specific property or project? No?
Hey, LT, I have a question. So
What's-
is there going to be a plan review fee, or I'm sorry, a fee presentation today, or is it, I have a fee question.
A fee question? Oh, is there going to be a presentation on fees? I don't believe so. Yeah.
So can I ask
They'll be the ladies to ask once we're finished up with this. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I can just send you an email?
We can talk.
Oh, can I ask you right now?
Oh, hold on a second. This is my email address. I've got some supporting documentation that would be helpful. It's basically the PowerPoint slide, the PowerPoint presentation on a Word format. So you didn't have to write everything down. I already got it written down for you. If you send me an email, I can respond with the PowerPoint, the supporting documentation, and if you'd like additional documentation, I can supply you with that too. So that's all I've got. If there's no more questions, I'll end it there. All right.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I mean, the big takeaway from there is the communication is key with any type of phasing, and the shell buildings seem to be the areas where we have the most problems, and being able to communicate and coordinate is key to keep from delaying the project. So we're ready to roll on to the next one, or do we want to do the break now? What do you think, Chief Carr?
We got the next break will be the noon break, the hour long.
Okay, so we'll move into the emergency radio communication systems with Edward, and I don't know, Ben, are you going to pitch in on this, or is it just Edward? All right, so it's the Edward show, so don't recognize him with his beard that he just grew, so we're excited to have this. This is, again, with the new 2021 code, this has become more critical in the completion of projects, and so we want to make sure that we give you the information. Like we said before, we will do a general overview of the 2021 code after this. We'll take a short break after this. We'll do the 2021 code, and then we'll be open up to any questions, public questions, and then we'll make our staff available for interaction and questions as well. So, Edward, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Can y'all hear me pretty well out there? Okay. All right. Okay, so this emergency responder communications enhancement systems, which is a lot to say in one mouthful. You may hear me call it ERCSIS or something along that line. It's a relatively newcomer to our submittal review process. It is considered a deferred submittals, similar to our fire alarm and sprinkler submittals. Typically, it is submitted by the installing contractor, and so my intent here is to give you sort of a rough sketch thumbnail of what it is, and then what does AFD, what does Austin Fire Department do with it? You know, what's our involvement? So, sort of an overview of what I just got through saying. You know, it's to understand the need. What is good communication as far as emergency responders and radio communication? We'll go over briefly. This is a very high overview of what I'm trying to show you in a small picture here of what a emergency responder communication enhancement system looks like. You know, so yeah, can you hear me better now? Okay, I'll try to stick closer to the mic. We'll also kind of briefly go over the submittal review process and acceptance test, and then the annual test. This presentation is based upon the most recent adoption, so it does differ from the previous edition, the 2015 edition of IFC, which we had pretty heavily amended. And with the 2021 edition, we basically wanted to keep it to the base code as much as possible. So there's hardly any amendments at all to the 2021 edition of IFC. So really, communication to anyone who's using cell phones, just relying on radios, which cell phones are, and it's everybody's experienced a time where they had an urgent need to use their cell phone for something other than texting or whatever else. They actually do voice communication. And the same thing for first responders is that not only is it extremely important to, it's two-way communication. And so it is so vital that it is pretty much also part of their strategy. I mean, it is basically their lifeline. So where does the requirement come from? It comes from Section 510, which I won't go over the whole thing, but as it's adopted, it became law. And so essentially, the problem is when the emergency responder radio signals, so when you look at the network for emergency responder communication, keep in mind it's not only just the push-to-talk radios that the firefighters use, and I'm going to, when I think emergency responder radio, emergency responders, I'm going to obviously relate to firefighters because that's where I'm at, but you're also talking about the radios and the fire apparatuses, fire trucks. You're also talking about dispatch. All those teams use emergency responder radio communication. So when we're talking about what the problem is, we're talking about where the signal has a problem reaching the inside of a building. So that's where portable radios by personnel are going to be used on the inside for coordination of fire attacks, possibly medical. So when you have a building that has construction materials that inhibit that, or even subgrade parking areas, for instance, are real prone to poor signals or maybe no signals. somehow or another you have to address that. And the code requires that first responders be able to communicate in those types of buildings. So the solution per the code is to, when this minimum required signals aren't strong enough or don't have the quality, aren't usable at all, the code requires systems and components to enhance the radio signals. So that's where the enhancement part of the acronym comes from. And so you can see this little diagram, there's a building on the other side here, where we have some equipment. This one calls out a BDA, bidirectional amplifier, and it shows some cables going to some indoor antennas, and that's basic. And we'll go in a little bit more to that next coming slides here. So this is a very simplistic view of what the emergency responder radio system enhancement system looks like. And essentially you have a network, and that's shown here with the barbershop looking antenna tower. And that's just one of many networked towers that carry the emergency responder radio signal. And you can picture someone inside the building using that portable radio. And so what happens is the signal goes into the building through the antenna on the roof that's installed for that purpose, goes to the booster, and you can think of it exactly as that, is it boosts the signal, and then goes to the cable to these inside antennas. And basically you're just retransmitting the signal that's on the outside of the building that was too weak or not able to penetrate the building shell. And then vice versa on when a firefighter, for instance, pushes the button to talk on their portable radio, it goes to the inside antenna and then back out to the signal booster, and then back out to the antenna on the roof, which broadcasts it back to the tower. That gives you your two-way communication. So we also have to define what is good radio coverage. And so the code does do that. 510.4.1 basically says that 95% of all areas and 99% of areas designated as critical areas need to have the signal strength. And the signal strength, well, let's define critical areas first. Critical areas are kind of shown on this screen already, as you would expect for a high-rise. A fire command center is very critical for staging firefighter operations. Fire pump rooms, elevator lobbies, and then at the bottom it says other areas deemed critical by HJ. That could be elevator control rooms, for instance, or possibly where emergency generators are. Now we get to the signal strength. So it has to have a certain signal strength because that's how radio frequency is measured. So negative 95 dBm and DAQ, which is digital audio quality of 3.0. So the signal strength really is considered fair by most measurement. And that's the signal strength outside the building, just being reboosted outside the building to inside the building. And then digital audio quality is really just that. It's how do you understand what is being said? And for emergency responder radio use, it is really, as you can tell from this graph right here, this chart, it's really minimal. It's not. It's just understandable. As a matter of fact, typically most contractors will aim obviously a little bit higher for that to account for, just have a buffer. I'm not going to go over all these bullet points, but essentially the arrangement of Section 510 gives you all the different requirements, how it's going to be installed, how it's maintained. There's a little section on high-rise. One thing to note is that we amended IFC so that we're actually using the 2019 editions of NFPA 72 and NFPA 1221. Also to note is that where the IFC code is more stringent, it takes precedence. It's going to count as the highest requirement, so that they are making it in each edition of the code to where the requirements are leveling out a little bit. But whereas where the IFC speaks to a higher requirement, it's the one that we'll take. That's the one we're going to use. The NFPA 1221 is just a short mention because it is primarily an installation standard. So it does mention a little bit more in detail for the cable requirements and whatnot. So again, it is the installation standard of how does it get installed. High-rise buildings, looks like we talked a little bit about that, but for emergency responder radios, we used to have it so that in the previous edition where you could use firefighters' phone jacks up to the TCO or to the C of O, but that is no longer the case, and what we find is most every high-rise building will require emergency responder communication enhancement system. And with the high-rises, there comes the installation of the cabling and just like the fire alarm system and the emergency electrical, it has to be in a 2-hour rated pathway for survivability purposes. Let's see here. We'll just move on. So Section 1103.2 speaks to existing coverage in existing buildings. So with the emergency responder radio communication, it's required in every type of building. There's not a certain size of building or a certain level of floors. Emergency responder radio is essentially a blanket requirement for firefighters to have their radios be able to work. So existing buildings are also required to have that. And with the exception of high-rises, which can keep their existing wired communication system as long as it's inoperable condition, there could be buildings that require emergency responder communication. I won't go into all the details of how that might be discovered, but in some cases, owners are doing their own research to find out what they have. In other circumstances, Austin Fire Department finds that there's some radio problems. So what we'll do is we'll send those to a team to look into and see what the particulars are, and then work with the owner on those. So now we're going to go quickly over the various components. There's not a lot. And so we have an outside donor antenna, which for the two-way communication takes in the signal and retransmits it. So it's a typical antenna in that regard. And it's usually mounted on the outside on the roof. It could be on a little platform like you see there, where it has those cinder blocks in those, or they could be mounted directly to a mechanical wall that covers the mechanical units. Over at the Q2 stadium, they had it on the side of the scoreboard, the soccer scoreboard. Now we get really to the heart of the system, which is the amplifier equipment. It's what you can just consider to be the booster, just that it does the work. So, as I said earlier, it's the heart of the system. It does both the receiving and the transmitting. The main things you'll see, and this is just the highlights, is the amplifier cabinet and the battery cabinet. The batteries for the secondary standby to power the amplifier. Depending on the scale of the system or the building that the system's installed in, you may actually have more than one level and more than one amplifier. The emergency responder enhancement system is really scalable and to only be to be used where it's needed. So I didn't mention this on a previous slide, but essentially you only have to have that coverage or those antennas inside the building where you need the coverage. So it's quite likely that you have a mid-rise building, apartment complex, where only the parking garage that's below grade has the inside antennas. That's going to be the extent of that building because the rest of the floors have the required minimum radio coverage. So that's a very important thing to note. So it's quite likely that you'll see a small design or one that only has certain levels on it. The amplifier must have a primary and secondary source of power. And the secondary source is, say, it can be on an emergency power generator. So if you have a high rise, you can definitely connect the secondary power to that generator. These systems are also required to have a remote annunciator. That remote annunciator is typically monitoring supervising some points. So you'll have, they're real simple. They have LEDs on them and a sounder, and so, but you'll have normal AC power showing if everything's green and working properly. If it's a high rise or if there is a fire command center, it has to be installed in that location. If it's not a high rise, then you'll just work with us on the location for where we'd like that to be installed. In addition to the annunciator, you have system monitoring, which in this case is fire alarm system monitoring. So the annunciator points and the fire alarm monitoring points are very similar. But they're strictly just a supervisory signal, and that's what we'll look for when we do the test. The inside antennas are just rebroadcasting or retransmitting the portable radio signals. And they're very small in most cases. You can see here the scale of them, and you might find them in a stairwell. The one on the bottom right-hand side is an example from a parking garage. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you may have some levels that may not have any of these inside antennas at all. And then to tie everything together, you have to have cables. So the backbone cable is what you see there in the dashed region, and essentially that's like the nervous system of all the equipment, and They are required to be plenum rated, which just means it has a outer jacket that's not going to produce poison when it's burned, basically. When you do the backbone cables, they have to be routed through an enclosure or area or room. It's kind of confusing when you use the enclosure part, but essentially it has to match the building's fire rating. So if you have a high rise, for instance, I think I mentioned this previously, you would need to have that backbone running and the equipment installed in a 2-hour rated stacked room. There are some other options that we can look at for the cabling if that's not possible. All those cable installations have to follow the National Electrical Code. We really want the contractors to be successful in their effort to get the submittal review, and so we do have a checklist that we have been using, but it hasn't been available on the website. But here is just some of the items that we asked the contractor to include in their submittal. Kind of the items that we pay particular attention to are all code referenced. And so, again, we're just trying to make the contractor successful and keep our expectations on the same page. And we mentioned, I think, Krisha Allen mentioned earlier about the compliance engines and submittals, and this is definitely one of the submittals that right now it sort of falls under miscellaneous, but eventually it's going to fall under its own type of submittal, and it'll be specific. And then kind of jumping into an acceptance test, this is what Lieutenant Knox mentioned earlier about, the acceptance test is done, but it is also done with another group too, with the City of Austin. It's with the City of Austin Wireless Communications, and their part in the test is to basically make sure that the new equipment that's being installed plays nicely with the network. If it's not dialed in, tuned, tested correctly, it could interfere with the network, and in some cases might even bring it down. So obviously, the Wireless Communications Division is going to make sure that all those issues are worked out because they're the ones that's issuing the FCC operating license to the owner for you turning on that amplifier and that equipment, because it is radio frequency or RF related, and it has a power that's beyond normal equipment. So the contractor test is also required, and typically that is done with their own spectrum analyzer. It only does the receiving portion of the test. We're working on trying to see if it's possible to have radios, to make radios available so they can do perhaps another, one of the most important aspects of it is whether or not a portable radio can do the uplink or transmit back. So we're looking at that possibility right now. We also do a visual inspection of the equipment, and again, that just bookends what I mentioned earlier about the submittal checklist. Essentially, we're just making sure that whatever is on the submittal and the plans matches what we find out in the field. So we're going to start at the top on the roof with the donor antenna, and then just follow the cabling down to each room or where connections are made to the inside antennas, all the way to where the amplifier, the booster is. And then we'll also have the AFD inspectors do a radio check. and that is it's subjective, but it's very good on determining that they know where the critical areas are, and they will check those areas with their portable radios. This is a typical walk test survey report. It follows the IFC requirements. This is just a sample, but you can see that you have a grid of 20 by 20 squares. This one is 40 by 40. I think that's because it failed to begin with. But you can tell that essentially they'll walk test those areas and do a measurement, which you can see in the center of those. And then obviously the red areas would be a problem. And I had mentioned a little bit about City of Austin Wireless Communication Services Division. It's just, again, it's important to note that in our process and procedure that a test will need to be scheduled with them prior to the test, the visual test and the inspector test. But this is some of the issues that they check for. And again, making sure that there's a little to none signal interference, near far signal issues. Those are all things that are related to radio frequency design. And we provide a FAQ sheet to contractors so that way they know kind of given a heads up at what the frequencies are and the contact information of who to contact. So Krisha mentioned earlier about the compliance engine. Well, this is one of the other systems that have to be uploaded on the initial installation. So that does two things. Obviously, it enrolls that building or that system into the system, and so that when the annual test comes up, it's captured in the database. But essentially, it is now a system that gets annually tested under those portions listed right there under 51061. Okay, I know that was a lot. That's a lot to take in. Hopefully, you've gotten kind of a picture of what the system is. I wanted to make mention that that basically the gators or gatters is for all first responders. It might be also for mutual aid right now, which is a pretty big thing. So there may be coordination with counties, with other service districts, and other jurisdictions. And ours falls under the Greater Austin. I can't even see it. Austin Transregional. It's the network. Anyway, I also wanted to make mention that we really support and promote saferbuildings.org. I highly recommend them. They're a non-for-profit organization and do really well at promoting emergency responder communication, and we follow them and think they do a great job. That's a lot I said, and I'm sorry that we had to run through it so quickly and give you such a high overview. But if you have any questions, I would definitely welcome them.
From the live stream.
Question number 1. Please give an example of the IFC taking precedence over NFPA regarding emergency responder communication enhancement systems. Well, I would say one of the examples would be that the IFC acceptance test and the annual test would take precedence over what's listed in the NFPA 1221. In the previous edition of the code, the standby battery duration was different. I believe it was 24 for IFC and 12 hours standby for the NFPA 1221 standards. But now it's become more synchronized. So for the most part, the 1221 standard is going to deal with the installation standard. It does make mention, again, of how to test, but the test that is the one that we'll be looking at will be the one that the IFC has and the procedure that it calls out in lines. Yes, sir.
Do we have to get rebroadcast approval from Gators, or is that covered up under the permanent submittal?
So, are you talking about the operating license, the FCC? Yes, sir. That is issued by the Wireless Communications Department. That's why they see make sure the equipment interfaces properly with the network, and then they'll issue the FCC operating license for that equipment.
We don't need them to rebroadcast. Once we put in our repeater, we're okay to rebroadcast their frequency inside this building because we have the city of Austin permit to install the system.
So I don't really know the answer to that, sir. My portion of the code really speaks to when it's required, which comes from the IFC, and then how to install it, which is through the NFPA standard. For the network interface stuff, it probably does need to come. I'll need to look into that answer and see, talk to the wireless, City of Austin Wireless Group. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, I have two real quick.
Okay.
You had said in your presentation that any building falls under this. I'm thinking like a multifamily that's a 3-story building. I was under the impression that it was 4 stories or more, but is Austin all buildings?
Yeah, the question was, is there a certain height or size of a building to where emergency responder radio coverage inside would be required? And it's all sizes. There is no limitation or floor requirement. All buildings are required to have to have emergency responder radio communication capability inside the building. Does that help? Okay.
The second question, we would go out and do, as a company, we go out and do a survey. If we find our survey does not require it, is there a form or do we need to upload our test results?
No, sir.
We wouldn't have to get a permit if it was.
So the question is whether or not for a survey, in-building survey, and it passes, right?
Yes.
If it passes, do we need to see a copy or have that uploaded to a particular website? At this moment, we don't really have that ability, because what we really track are actual installed systems that are required. I would say that the owner would need just to keep that on their files, in their records, so that they know, and then we can just keep it to systems that are newly installed that we're keeping compliance tracking with.
More from the live stream.
Question is, will they be requiring contractors to get a GROL license, or will the new NICET certification be accepted? So right now, the International Fire Code does require a GROL license. And that's the way it's written right now. Would that change between now and the next edition? I really don't know. But for now, yes, we are requiring a GROL license as one of the qualifications. Will the new NICET certification be accepted? Absolutely. But we also understand that that's a new program that's going to take some time to ramp up. So currently, I don't have that as among the qualifications to have a NICET certification for the technician or designer. But yes, that will be forthcoming as that NICET certification becomes available and ramps up. If there's no more questions, then thank you for your time and patience. And if you have any additional questions, of course, you can always email us at fireprevention@austintexas.gov. And we want you to be successful, so we're doing everything we can to make the process open and expectations clear across the board. And so thank you all for your time.
I know there are a couple of follow-up items with that, Edward. Thank you, and we can work on that, the licensing questions and some of those for y'all, so we can get that information out. We're going to take the 10-minute break right now. Then when we come back, we'll have a short presentation on the fire code from Ben Flick, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A from there. So go ahead and take a restroom break right now, and then we'll come back and hopefully be done by around 12:30 or so.
You're live.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name's Ben Flick. I am with the engineer section. So we're just going to kind of run through the 2021 code, fire code update, some of the new changes that were in the model code, and then some of the new changes that we adopted locally as part of the ordinance. So just a kind of brief agenda. We're going to kind of cover just the history and adoption. We were talked about earlier, so we'll just kind of brief on that. And then we're going to jump into the model code changes, which were from the root 2021 IFC itself, and then local amendment changes. Those are going to kind of intermix just so they flow a little better. And then any questions or any kind of open discussion on this or any other presentations, we'll have time at the end to kind of jump into that. So the 2021 IFC and local amendments were adopted by City Council on June 3rd, 2021, and they were in effect on September 1st. For reference, there is the ordinance number that is how you can find it on the City Clerk's website or Muni Code. So getting right into it, as we kind of go, anything with an asterisk next to the section number, that's going to be a local amendment designation, kind of how I break that out. So this table has been in section 105 for a while. It's our hazmat table for reportable limits on when you need a hazmat permit. So for this cycle, what we did is added some additional systems, the storage systems, as technology has advanced, and we're kind of striving away from just the typical lead acid battery or VRLA, and we're starting to get into some different of the salts and the lithium ion. We've taken a look at NFPA 855 and what's trending, and added that to this chapter or this table as far as when you need a hazmat permit. As covered by Ashley earlier, emergency responder plans. So as part of the code, this section 409, we've actually added the requirement in the code for this cycle. Essentially what we're doing is just looking for a way that we can get access to those plans as part of the permit project process for the projects as they're coming through new. What we're looking for is that at the end of the project, the architect or engineer submits the plans to AFD in a suitable format. Most likely right now that's going to be PDF. It is listed in the code as a DWG or DXF. Don't really have the means to do that now. Hopefully, that may roll into a feature that we can accept, but most likely just PDF. There is a tag for existing buildings. Essentially, we put a 3-year limit on when we would be hopefully looking to get those types of plans from any existing buildings that we don't already have. She's done a great job reaching out and working with crews to get a lot of that information. So plan requirements, what we're really looking for, looking through here, it really mirrors what our phasing plans are. We're looking for any exit passageways, horizontal exits, fire alarm panel, remote enunciator panel locations, any fire department connections, valves, standpipes, any sort of sprinkler control, and then any of the rated walls. Won't touch too much on this. Edward did a great job covering this, but 510, so that was a model code change. It changed how the signal strength was measured, listing for the equipment, and then clarified on the coverage area. For fuel oil storage for stationary generators, we changed that for exterior. Some of the risk modeling that we looked at, or the hazmat group looked at, we're able to look at the hazard and maybe reduce that a little bit. So for any above ground outdoor fuel storage over 660 gallons, the requirement is that it's got to be 50 feet from the property line. If it is in a 2085 tank, then we need to follow NFPA 30 guidance. And then if there is over 20,000 gallons, then it's a public notification requirement. Section 611, this is the AEDs in a high-rise. That was previously in Section 408 of the 2015 local amendment. It was kind of just shoehorned in there. Didn't really seem to fit or flow, so we just moved it. Seemed to fit a little bit better in this chapter, as it's more for building systems and whatnot. So new in either the 18 or the 21 code, it's kind of a tough split because City of Austin didn't adopt the 2018, but there was a lot of changes in the 2018 and compounded with the 2021 codes and some changes. So we're doing a little bit of catch up on there. But from research and kind of what was going on in the industry, Group 1 F1 distilled spirits automatically sprinkler requirement. We amended that to kind of clarify and expand on that. So distilled spirit manufacturing and mixing, if it's greater than 20% by volume, and when it exceeds the MAQ is when we're going to require sprinklers for those types of situations. As part of the new model code for this section, 903293, S1, if you're storing distilled spirits in bulk storage, then sprinkler systems required. That's a little kind of blurb that's added under S1 for that area. Moving on to S2, parking garages. This was probably one of the bigger changes that we saw in the systems code. So an enclosed parking garage over 12,000 square feet is going to require a sprinkler system. If it's below any other occupancy except an R3, it's going to require a sprinkler system. And then the real big one is open parking garages greater than 48,000 square feet. So historically, it was really only standpipes, or if you were exceeding the table in the code, which allowed a lot of tiers and a lot of area. So 48,000 is the limit on it now. A new one that's in there that we haven't really seen yet, but I'm sure it's probably coming, is mechanical access. So if it's you park and then it kind of does a conveyor to go store the vehicle, that's going to require a specially engineered automatic sprinkler system, and not kind of just the run-of-the-mill 13. So it needs to kind of take a couple other factors into account for that. Another big change that we saw in this section is for NFPA 13R systems. So this kind of puts a limit on when you can use a 13R in a in an apartment or an R2. So if it's 4 stories or less above grade plane, if the highest floor level is 30 feet or greater above grade plane, lowest level is 30 feet or lower, that should have been lower, the below grade plane, then it'll be allowed to have a 13R system. If it exceeds or is outside of any of those limits, then it's going to have to be a full 13 system. One caveat that it added is number of stories as allowed by IBC 510.2 and 510.4, which are we call it the podium provisions, kind of lets you reset your number of stories from that podium structure, but it's still going to be following that height limit. So if you have 3 stories of parking garage with the podium and then 1 story of apartment above it, but that apartment is just above 30, then it's going to have to be a full 13. If you can kind of pull that down, you can keep it at a 13R. Rolling into some fire alarm requirements. So Group S manual fire alarm system is going to be required in public and private or self-storage occupancies that are 3 stories or greater when there's interior corridors or common areas. And then obviously visual devices won't be required in storage units. A provision that we've required for a while and kind of had some additional language and some clarifying language is going to be the low frequency sounder bases. And what this section really is requiring is an additional device, essentially. When you had the single or multiple station devices, you could get a sounder base, or if you can't get a sounder base, then a separate system or device is going to be required, and that's going to have to connect to the fire alarm system. Section 916 was kind of an expanded one on the gas detection system. So what we did is kind of added amendments just to align what we're seeing in the industry with the code requirements. as far as what NFPA standards. NFPA standards for a lot of this stuff is basically like a year or so ahead than what this code section, or this code cycle is. So we looked at forward and pulled some of that back to be able to utilize that. One of the big ones is that we effectively shifted Chapter 10 all the way over to the Development Services Department and took it out altogether. As we were going through the code adoption process, we noticed there was a lot of overlapping amendments, and there was actually some amendments from the last code cycle that were just a little bit off, and it was creating some quirks. So to kind of eliminate that confusion, we just moved it all the way over to DSD. Vice versa, we took Chapter 9 from DSD and adopted that solely in the fire code. One of the big new chapters is Chapter 12, Energy Systems. There was a lot of provisions in Chapter 6 in the 2015 code that we were moved over to this Chapter 12 and really added on for that. The energy storage systems, it's got photovoltaic systems for both residential and commercial. It has generators, and then it has the UPS systems, the backup batteries like that. So Section 1207 was electrical energy storage systems. Typically what we're seeing a lot of now these days is the lithium ion or some of those hybrid salts. So this was heavily amended by our hazmat group, and this table here essentially is if you're exceeding these capacities, then you have to follow the provision similar to what the old 608 was, and these thresholds are the same as what were listed in the reportable quantities limit at the front. So if you're below this, no hazmat permits required. If you hit this, then a hazmat permit's required, and then you have to follow the provisions of the code. As I said, this was heavily amended. Probably would exceed kind of what the purpose of this is, just as kind of introduce, like there's a lot of new sections and that were amended, so be aware of kind of what those are. And then some specific requirements in this table as far as when exhaust ventilation is required, explosion control, any kind of spill control, thermal runaway detection system. That's another one that's added for the lithium ion systems. And that's 120766 there. This was, I think, just a relocation for semiconductor fabrication facilities. That chapter was reorganized, and we carried this amendment forward. So some new chapters in 2021 and 2018 are listed here. So Chapter 38 is higher education laboratories. Don't really foresee a lot of these coming through. This is going to be for college campuses. The colleges around here are their own AHJ, or they're governed by the state fire marshal, not us. So, but there is information in there if you kind of run across a project that you're going to be doing on one of those campuses. There's new provisions in the code for that. Chapter 39 is for processing and extraction facilities. So this is for extracting oils from plants through a chemical process. Again, not really anything we've seen around here, but this was a hot topic during the 2018 and still kind of going on in the code adoption process, and just how to nail everything down to try to keep up with the new technologies for what these facilities are seeing and what they're doing. It's a chemical extraction process. So, for example, one of them, they use liquid propane to draw the oil out and then kind of evaporate off that propane. So that's, a lot of hazards involved with that. And then Chapter 40 is the storage of distilled spirits and wines. That kind of builds off of what we saw in Chapter 9 for as far as F1 and S1 storage for sprinkler requirements and just general requirements for those. So moving on to Chapter 50, so we've got hazmat general provisions. With this one, pretty much is just looking for gas detection and isolation for any of the piping. That's going to be a health class 3 or 4, flammability class 4, instability class 3 or 4, and any pressurized piping above 15 psi. We're looking for leak detection, an emergency shut-off for those types of systems. Kind of just trying to look at what technology and systems and try to keep everything safe. So, like I said, there's, IBC has a lot of changes too, but the intent was just to kind of look at IFC sections here, and then cover those and just give kind of just an update where we're at. So that's what I've got. Appreciate everybody's time. I'll take questions or on this or any other presentation that we've got. All right.
Yeah, we open up questions for any of the staff that's here, or any questions online.
Nothing online. Yeah, they've
All right.
already been asked.
QA is standing between us and lunch, so we're ready for lunch.
That's right. It's close to lunch. Ben, thank you for that, and thank you for everybody for coming out. Appreciate the opportunity to share information with y'all. And like I said, we have staff here, and so all our staff that's here are available for questions or discussions. We'll hang out here for the next 30 minutes or so, and we're glad to answer any questions. Again, I think communication is a big deal for us and for y'all too, and for us to be able to talk to each other. These big changes with, the Chapter 12 things with energy storage and energy production. I think we're out in front of most organizations with that, with our response and our planning for it, but it's changing so fast, it's really difficult to keep up. So, anytime you run into anything or you have anything that you're not sure about, that's new, that's different, that doesn't fit squarely into one of the code sections or something like that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help, and we really want your developments to be safe and successful. And when y'all are safe and successful, we're safe and successful. So again, appreciate all the help with everything. And again, we're grateful for y'all taking the time out to meet with us today, and we're here for questions for the next 30 minutes. So if anybody has anything, we'll hang out. But other than that, we'll wrap things up. And I appreciate everybody coming out and working through all these things. So that's it. Thank you.